I have watched My Hero Academia far too many times, and it takes up a non-insignificant amount of my brain space daily. Some would call me obsessed, and to that I say, being called an obsessed My Hero Academia fan is a bad look. Please don't call me that. But also, you wouldn't be wrong. My Hero Academia gets a lot of flack, some deserved, some to me being completely ridiculous. So in this series, I want to hopefully document everything I like or dislike about the series. Fun facts, character analysis, manga comparisons, and anything else I want to say about it for every single episode. No holding back. Welcome to My Hero Academia Overanalyzed Season 1. Before we start, I'd like to quickly set some groundwork for this series. First of all, full spoilers for the anime ahead. I will in some cases be talking about the final episodes of the final season here, so if you aren't caught up to the anime, I'd recommend doing that unless you just don't mind spoilers. This is also a compilation of all my videos I made for Season 1, but I am including some new analysis here, in a lot of cases from the comments, so if you'd like to be along for the ride in the future, and even potentially be in a video, consider subscribing if you enjoy this. Back to the nitty-gritty. In this series, I'll be using the dub instead of the sub, not because I prefer it, though the dub is excellent, but because it's easier to watch this in the background if I'm not forcing you to look over and read the subtitles. And finally, before we start, I'd like to also mention that this series is directly inspired by Overanalyzing Avatar, which is simply incredible. Some of the most binge-worthy YouTube videos on the platform. So check it out if you've seen Avatar. And if you haven't seen Avatar, do that. Also, I did get permission beforehand to use the format, so don't worry about that. Now, on to Season 1, Episode 1, Izuku Midoriya, Origin. This clock doesn't make sense. Yeah, this is how we're starting the series. I'm picking a fight with this damn clock. So clearly it's past 3 here, nearly 4, but the minute hand here is at exactly 15 minutes, which, with how close the hour hand is to 4, doesn't make any logical sense. To my knowledge, Japanese clocks work the same as American ones, and if that's true, then this clock is physically impossible. It's either broken or wrong. The entire point of me checking this clock was to see if it was after school, which normally gets out at 3 p.m., so it does kind of check out, but in checking to see this, I've uncovered a mistake in the first second of the show. Or I don't know how Japanese clocks work, which would not be a great note to start the series on. So it may seem a bit weird for Bakugo to be punching here, considering his quirk, but in the manga he does actually sock him, with an explosion coming out of his knuckle, it looks like. Which is a bit weird considering he can only secrete the nitroglycerin-like substance from his palms until he gets his quirk awakening in Season 7. But it's not unheard of for children to unknowingly repress their quirks until they're older, either due to physical strain, which would make sense in Bakugo's case, or because of trauma. Minor early My Hero Academia vigilante spoilers, but when Koichi discovers he can essentially walk on air, it's revealed that his mother actually conditioned him to repress that when he was young due to her being worried that he'd be hurt by it. And in the main series case, Shigaraki had a mental block after he killed his entire family using his quirk, repressing both his quirk and the memory along with it. So, it's not impossible Bakugo could have produced an explosion from a place other than his palm before his awakening, especially when he's a child. However, a few more likely explanations is that Horikoshi hadn't gotten Bakugo's quirk specifics down yet, Bakugo discovered that it's more effective with an open palm later, or that this panel is him heating up his palm and this isn't actually an explosion, but rather the leftover smoke from the heat. Though it's not visible in this panel. But who even cares? This punch was entirely cut from the anime itself anyways.
Here's the sad truth. All men are not created equal.
The all men are not created equal line is a great hook, but when it's said, it also focuses on Izuku's foot, which is where the extra toe joint is, the reason why he doesn't have a quirk. Pretty cool framing and anime original. These lines and next couple of scenes outside of that foreshadowing also just do a great job at establishing Izuku as a character. From the first shot of him, we know he's willing to stand up for others, even against someone who's clearly physically stronger. Even when he's visibly scared, he's still standing his ground against Bakugo just to protect this kid. This is reinforced by his current self, now over a decade later, saying that him being weaker wouldn't hold him back, establishing both his drive and his resilience. This is great to set up now, considering how hard he later works to train his body, and One For All itself, into a workable state. All of this is established in under a minute, and somehow the manga achieves this in even less time. I do like the anime in this case, I think it flows nicer for the medium, but the simplicity of the one-page opening, with the same quote about not being born equal, to the incredibly captivating, but that was my first and last setback, is so simple and effective. I think it may even be a better hook than the anime, even if the anime does a tad more legwork to establish Izuku himself. Alright, let's go over the intro. May as well get it out of the way, right? So, very obviously, the first scene of the intro is symbolizing Izuku's admiration for All Might, his idol. All Might's back is turned to him here, but he slowly turns back as Izuku reaches out towards him. This is a simple but effective way of showing how All Might recognizes Izuku, while Izuku is still far away from him and still very much holding All Might in a high regard, the light literally coming from him. The next is a bunch of flashcards of the students, all showing off their personality pretty well with their names. Nothing too noteworthy here, but it's cool. One thing though is that the Plus Ultra, My Hero, and Academia title cards flash red, yellow, and blue, which is All Might's color scheme. The next scene is Izuku looking up at, then walking away dejectedly from a billboard. This says in Japanese,
君もヒーローになろうサイドキツク募集
which literally translates to "You too can be a hero, sidekick wanted," at least according to D-Bell and Google Translate. Thank you, Google, by the way, for this feature where you can write out the letters to get them. But what's fascinating here is that these are the exact same words that All Might uses when telling Izuku that he can be a hero at the end of episode 2 in Japanese. So cool foreshadowing / reference. Then it's Izuku walking in front of his notebooks. Not much to add here other than it's pretty neat for his handwriting in the Japanese alphabet to change as he gets older to reflect him growing up. Then we get more feet imagery. Sounds weird, but again, the toe joint, so it makes sense. Also, his shoes are a pretty integral part of his design in general, so it could just be that. Shout out to Red Shoe Theory! After that, we get his books tumbling down, either being a direct reference to Bakugo burning one and throwing it out later in this episode, or it being symbolic for his dreams falling apart, or being seemingly unobtainable. Next shot is easy peasy, the line in the middle softly radiating as they were kids, where Bakugo's distaste for Izuku began. Then, as they transition to middle school, then high school, the line grows more sporadic and violent before they both clash, just showcasing how the two's tensions have risen over the years. Also serves as a direct reference to the Volume 2 cover of the manga. After some cool shots, we get this one with two enemies. I was skeptical if they actually appear in the USJ, but they do, here and here. Cool animation of All Might punching the Nomu, obviously teasing their fight at the end of the season, but this entire shot has a background that's weirdly reminiscent of the Vestige world in One For All. Likely not intentionally, but I thought I would point it out. Equally not intentionally, probably, is the shot of Kurogiri transitioning into Aizawa. They are connected way later in the series, with Kurogiri being Aizawa's classmate Shirakumo. Though again, likely not intentional this far back. Okay, more pinpointing if these guys actually appear. This one appears here, but I don't think any of the others actually exist in the show. Correct me if I'm wrong. There's some with similar features, but this one is the only one that really has an exact match to my knowledge. Also, this transition is cool. To finally finish this intro off, another pretty obvious one. One For All is coursing in the back as the arms switch between Izuku's and All Might's, signifying that One For All is within both of them and that they're connected. If you didn't catch that, I'd be surprised, but I can't not mention it. Obviously kind of weird for this baby to be born with a quirk when quirks are known to develop by the age of 4, and you'd be correct if this wasn't probably a mutation. This is confirmed to not even be the first quirk person to be born, as at the very least All For One and Yoichi were born a year beforehand, and their mother had a quirk. Likely not one she was born with, seems like it was more of a disease, but regardless, what the glowing baby probably is the first baby with a quirk mutation to be born. This is further backed up by the statement of quirks popping up around the globe shortly after, likely the first children to start developing quirks. Manga only analysis. This page wasn't adapted, but it contains a bunch of references. We got Ultraman, Superman, Wolverine, whose silhouette always reminded me of Stars and Stripes here for some reason, and Spider-Man. In references I didn't immediately get, we also have Kamen Rider, Devilman, sick-ass name, and Moonlight Mask, who I always thought was Moon Knight, same head crest, but apparently I was wrong and there was another moon-based superhero this was referencing. My bad. The footstep sounds here aren't actually lined up with this animation at all. Ah, no, stop! I always kind of assumed his power was just a base strength increase, but you can actually hear a charge-up sound as well as see some sparks fly here. Maybe he has an electricity-based quirk as well? Seems like his hero persona is more around his strength though, considering his full hero name is Punching Hero Death Arms. Also, this is an anime original scene to transition back from the monologue, and it does a pretty good job at that.
Assault, robbery, and the illegal use of powers during rush hour traffic.
This entire scene is really good at beginning to set up this world organically. Through Death Arms and Backdraft, it gets established that people know of certain heroes. Then with Kamui Woods, we can see that being further exemplified into seemingly a full fan base. It's also shown that villain attacks like this are so normalized that people not only gather to watch, but are also just used to being interrupted on their commute. More of a minor inconvenience or even a novelty to them. We also see the competition for attention that heroes have to face right away, with Mount Lady interrupting and getting all the credit for the defeat of the villain, planting that seed of heroes doing their job only for fame and money rather than being a true hero, which is a theme that gets explored much more with Stain in Season 2 and is one that continues throughout the series, being further corroborated by the fact that it's said that the more famous of a hero you are, the more you're paid by the government, already showing that the system is flawed. All of this is conveyed in a very short amount of time, and you don't even really notice how much is being set up here. It's pretty great world building right away, and the anime's expansion on it was really well done.
Gigantification, huh?
Some more good characterization for Izuku, showing him studying heroes and their abilities. This establishes his general analytical side, which he uses a lot early on while still getting One for All under control, and even before that next episode. I think it was a really good idea to make him a strategist. It allows him to still nearly be on the same level as his peers while he's still getting his quirk itself up to par with his classmates, and establishing that now with his notebooks is a great way to do it. Also, shout out to Starhead Guy.
It's time to start thinking seriously.
Okay, quirk analysis time. From left to right, starting in the front, it looks like this guy can turn parts of himself into gas. Could be useful in fights, but probably wouldn't be great for takedowns themselves. Good for utility. Rockman here has a pretty good quirk for a hero, I think, assuming he can't just be punched apart while in that form. This guy just has hair that grows, I think, not particularly good. This girl over here has horns, but they seem to be retractable since she didn't have them in the previous scene at all. Second row, spiky hand guy. Could be good for villain takedowns if it's durable, though it seems rather dangerous. This girl isn't showing off a quirk, seemingly. This guy is wild. I don't think Evil Mouth would be great for hero work. This girl has telepathy of some kind. Back another row. I think this is just hair levitation or hair growth of some kind again. This guy is just pulling out his eyes. Maybe a quirk that allows him to stretch himself. Otherwise, not too useful. This guy's quirk would be an active detriment. One good slice and your head's gone, bud. Unless you could do that with other parts of your body. Wood head guy? This girl seems to have a spiraling air quirk similar to Nejire or Inasa, so that could actually be very good. Back row, long finger man. Don't think that would be that good. We have some sort of throat expanding quirk. Could be good for music playing. Don't know about heroism. Got a fire quirk, that's good. This guy destroyed his fucking uniform. Seems like a body enhancer, so that could probably be good. This guy just has big ears. I don't know what that's about. This person back here seems to control some sort of energy with her hand. Not quite sure what that is, but it looks cool. This guy is the glowing baby reincarnated. This guy seems to have an extra pair of arms, the next Spider-Man. This guy has a wild hairdo, and this one just has a long nose. And finally, this guy is just excited to be here, I think.
I'm the real deal, but these guys will be lucky to end up as sidekicks to some busted D-lister.
I think Bakugo's role in this episode is honestly one of the weaker aspects of characterization and general plot in it. This introductory scene does a serviceable job at introducing him, but it kind of misses in some aspects as well. I do really like the emphasis with his test results being good. I feel like characters with the tropes Bakugo has tend to be characterized as stupid or dumb, and I think that Bakugo being smart is actually a huge part in why he becomes likable later on. Though his lines about specifically money never really come up again in regards to his character, and his anger and bullying is kind of turned up to 11 here, and it feels a bit too much. His actual introduction isn't the worst, but after he does literally assault Deku in front of his entire class and teacher and gets no repercussions. I think it could have been used a bit more subtly. I think it does a pretty decent job at establishing Bakugo's superiority and inferiority complex though, showing his superiority through him literally being above his other classmates and being absurdly confident in getting into the top hero school, right before showing his inferiority when he gets extremely defensive and angry about someone he deems as weak, aiming for the same goal. Again, I wish it was done in a more subtle manner, but it does do a good job at getting everything Bakugo is about on the table right away.
Be able to hang with the best of the best.
Fairly obvious, but these are all students that were in his class. Here are their counterparts. Also, right after, we get a shot focusing on Izuku's foot again, more foreshadowing for his toe joint. This framing was even more explicit in the manga, with it literally being highlighted here.
Remember when we didn't have to worry about randos with quirks all the time?
The dub here adds a really weird line that implies that quirks were a recent development, which is absolutely not the case. This is either just a mistake or a reference to All Might's presence dwindling as his power gets weaker. But considering it isn't really even close to the original line, I don't think this has any deeper meaning, just an odd change, especially since they're off-screen talking. It's not like they have to worry about lip syncing.
I am here.
All Might's introduction is, as you'd expect, fantastic. It's to the point and is already raising questions to the viewers. For starters, clearly he's a hero, as shown by the crowd's reaction to seeing him, as well as his declaration against the villains, but it also serves to raise questions about why he morphs into a different form here. Why was he so skinny before? Do people know about this? It provides a great hook for his character right away. Also, his "because I am here" is badass. Though, maybe he shouldn't do this on an open street in the entrance to a convenience store. You'd think video surveillance would have caught this happening by now. See, now this is a clock I can respect. It's at 3:30, the time most students get out of school. That's what I like to see.
I don't know what you think you're doing, Deku, but we're not done.
I don't like this scene very much. You know how I said earlier that Bakugo is too over the top? This is what kind of pushes that over the edge for me. I think having two almost back-to-back scenes of Bakugo bullying Izuku was not a good choice narratively, because it both makes it out to seem like this is a more common occurrence than it's later implied to be, and doesn't establish anything new. Not only that, but the anime made this scene have a comedic undertone, which was just a really bizarre choice. Also, Bakugo is just kind of characterized to be too mean here. Considering his later coolness in only a couple chapters, I don't really think him telling Izuku to
And take a swan dive off the roof of the building
would be something he would ever really say, even if he didn't think Izuku was going to go through with it. This is supported by literally Horikoshi himself. I think if you wanted to make this scene work, take out Bakugo's rage from the earlier scene, which was already my main problem with it, and just have him bully Izuku directly here after class. That way it has a bit more of a grounded tone, and it's not made out to look like the teachers would allow a kid to be bullied literally right in front of them. There's an example of a scene just like this in a few episodes, which I'll talk about more when we get there. I think doing that and dialing Bakugo back, then removing this weird comedic tone would make it work really well as a character establishment for Bakugo. But as is, it's definitely the weakest aspect of the episode.
Idiot. You can't go around telling people to kill themselves.
This, on the other hand, has really good characterization for Izuku, showing that in the face of adversity, he isn't all that bothered by it, maybe even being used to it at this point. He also, in the sub and the manga, shows some concern for the person that just bullied him, being worried that he could be charged if he went through with it. Which, is great at showing how little Izuku values himself here, because that is the last thing you should be thinking of. But it also does a good job at showing his care for others even if they don't care about him. It also shows a bit of Izuku's less optimistic side, giving him more depth. It's also just a good scene tonally. I like the fish food line as dry humor, and the general frustration is really believable. I don't have too much to add to this flashback other than it's just more good setup, giving his admiration for All Might context as well as the foot imagery being explained here. It's also interesting that this is the debut of All Might, likely just in Japan considering he had done this before. Also, his costume is probably not correct here considering this is his Golden Age suit, the modern one, whereas he debuted in Japan with probably either the Young Age or the Bronze Age suit. But what's weird is that the figure Izuku has in the poster on his wall is the Silver Age costume, which is at least closer, so I'm kind of confused on why that costume at least wasn't used if it had been designed. But hey, small issue. Just to address this as well, this is Dr. Garaki, the League's doctor, and All for One's right hand. The fact that this is the same person never really comes up in the story, so it was either an Easter egg, a reused design, or a plot seed that was never capitalized on. Cool, but kind of meaningless detail. I don't think All for One stole Izuku's quirk or anything. Also, the anime loses this joke of Izuku's face being the exact same from this panel to this panel, which is pretty funny.
My world was crumbling.
More feet imagery! I never noticed how many there were. This has to be intentional, right? One detail about feet that I didn't initially catch, though, is what this commenter pointed out. The focus on All Might's feet could also be foreshadowing for him being quirkless, just like Izuku. Very small change here from the manga to the anime. Izuku's walking out of the tunnel in the manga, but in the anime, he's walking into it. They also added his laugh imitating All Might here. All Might's entrance is also slightly different, seemingly more quicker in the manga and more grandiose in the anime. Another change I like is the one they made to Izuku here, where he's falling out of the slime, because in the manga it kind of seems like he just blacks out for no reason. All Might's punch here is also interesting because in the manga he directly punched the villain, and in the anime he uses wind pressure, which is actually kind of cool setup for using straight up air force in combat, which All Might uses a decent amount, and obviously Izuku uses both with his finger flicks and also with his air force gloves.
Thought we lost you there!
Once again, really strong characterization here. This introduction to the more real version of All Might as more of a person who can joke and have actual feelings rather than this godly figure we've seen from Izuku's perspective. It makes him really likable immediately. This scene also establishes even more intrigue into All Might when he starts bleeding from the mouth. And kind of unrelated, but this scene's manga panel is used at the back of every volume, at least in English, to tell you to read the other way around, so it's really ingrained in my brain.
Bang on the door for a while. Someone will let you in.
It's odd that he says to bang on the door, but in the next episode he opens it just fine. I guess he just assumed it was locked, but then it wasn't, and damn, that's lucky, because it would have been quite awkward if they were both stuck on the roof after All Might crushed his dreams. Really love the framing of this and some other shots coming up. Him pulling his hand back is sort of a parallel to the opening where he was reaching out to All Might. The intro even has a moment of hesitation at the very end as well. I love his initial dejection and then his resolve coming back just through his desire to be a hero and his admiration for All Might.
I'm a normal kid without any powers.
Again, the feet being shown when he says he doesn't have any powers. I never noticed they did this so much. This has to be intentional, right? Okay, quick outro analysis. First shot is Izuku's future hero costume, obviously. Then we get a bunch of shots of All Might, which the costume was inspired by, and obviously just general inspiration for Izuku. Then the shine of him becomes a star that Izuku chases after throughout most of the rest of this intro. This is pretty direct symbolism of Izuku running towards his distant goal of being a hero like All Might, or more directly being his successor. In this little break, we can see a tiny Izuku imitating All Might, which has the insane payoff of both this scene and this scene later on in the series. These two shots are interesting. It's Izuku as a child, crying, likely due to him not having a quirk or not being able to be a hero. Then we get that contrasted by when Izuku is crying on the beach. It took me a bit to really place this, but I think this is after he gets accepted into UA. So those are likely tears of joy rather than sadness. Then the final shot is probably the beach that Izuku cleaned. And that's the first episode. Good lord, this video was supposed to be like 10 minutes. Really goes to show how good this episode is at establishing this world for the future as well as its characters that I had this much to talk about. It's insane how good of a first episode it is, as a hook for the viewer and for all the other reasons I mentioned. It's not perfect, like I've said, but it does such an excellent job of doing what it needed to do. My only major problem with the episode is just the Bakugo stuff, and that's saying a lot. I feel like this and the next episode is near perfect as an opening to this series and world, and you can't say that about a lot of shows. So, with all that being said, let's continue right along to Season 1, Episode 2, What It Takes to Be a Hero.
Despite everything, I still dream. And I have to know.
It's fairly rare in My Hero Academia to have a recap with new dialogue added into the scene itself, but this is the first instance of that. Last episode he was silent towards the end, but in this recap we kind of get an extension of his brief internal monologue from last episode. Here are both of them stitched together.
Sometimes I do feel like I'm a failure. Like there's no hope for me. But even so, I'm not gonna give up. Ever. Even if everyone thinks I'm useless. Despite everything, I still dream. And I have to know.
It's pretty interesting, as they could have just reused last episode scenes and it would have been fine, but I appreciate the additions, even if the new dialogue doesn't really add much new to Izuku.
Without a quirk?
The scene is really interesting with the benefit of hindsight. It's almost directly a parallel to All Might meeting Nana when he himself was quirkless, so his attention being drawn to Izuku here was likely because he was in this exact situation before he got One for All. Honestly, if All Might didn't run out of time, it's possible his answer to Izuku's question may have been different. But his time limit and injury is a very stark reminder of the dangers of being a hero in this society. Plus, even Nana brushed off All Might initially until he had his proposal of the symbol of peace, which Izuku doesn't have going for him.
I want people to see my fearless smile and feel safe. And be the kind of hero everyone in the world looks up to.
This monologue is some more pretty solid establishment for Izuku, specifically his motives for being a hero. His reasons are noble, wanting to save people. This is a pretty stark contrast to Bakugo's motives in the last episode being for fame and money. However, this also shows a bit of Izuku's idealized worldview of heroes, specifically with his lines about having a fearless smile, and just a bit about it being the coolest thing in the world. I won't dig too deep into that yet, but we'll get there. So this does a cool thing right here. It's already been established that Izuku is a huge All Might fan, so seeing him freak out once All Might deflates is an easy answer to at least one of the questions that was raised last episode. That being, do people know about All Might's shrunken form? The answer being, no. people do not know. It's a cool way to establish that quickly and serves as a good segue into the intro. These posters in the back have All Might on them, obviously, but are also just slightly too detailed for just being in the background here, so I digged for their origins, and they both come from All Might Season 1 character design sheets. The one on the left here notably doesn't have a full color version of the design sheet, but the finished version of it was turned into a fig pin here. The angle of the shot is a little weird when closely examined because the street goes down this way, but Bakugo kicks the sludge villain out of the alleyway, so why is it hitting the pole from the street side of it? Did Bakugo punt it all the way across? Actually, yeah, because the pole in the last shot has the same green sticker on it, so this shot actually holds up surprisingly. Get my man on the soccer team. Also in the manga, Bakugo wasn't actually in an alleyway at all. Also, here in the manga, this commenter pointed out that Bakugo has a soda can that reads lip service, which could imply that he didn't fully mean what he said to Izuku in the classroom. Pretty cool detail if that is indeed the implication.
Weren't you and Midoriya good friends back when you were kids?
Yeah, you were a little harsh with them today.
It's his own fault for getting in my way.
Okay, so this entire scene with Bakugo and his friends is probably the best characterization for Bakugo so far. Until now, we've only seen him as a loud asshole, but here we see him in a more subdued setting. He's still a bit of a dick, but you can tell he's deeper than just a yelling, explodey bastard. By having him interact with his friends and stuff, it makes him less of an archetype. And that was probably needed before Izuku tries to save him, so we feel for him just a little bit more. This also at least helps lessen the last episode's issues a little bit by establishing that he isn't usually as mean to Izuku, though it is funny that he worries about being caught at a bar, as if he didn't just attack another student in class. And unrelated, just a couple of quick manga comparisons, but he actually tells his friends off for smoking rather than trying to get into a bar in the manga. Also, in this shot in the manga, Bakugo is actually facing away from the sludge villain, which is pretty horrifying. Kind of prefer that framing. And this entire scene actually takes place before Izuku lands on the roof here, likely being changed to help the first episode end on that cliffhanger, which was a good decision.
You know how guys at the pool are always sucking in and flexing and trying to look buff? I'm like that.
This is actually good to establish here, since Izuku doesn't ever become as physically buff as All Might, even though they were both born quirkless. All Might is just built like that. I mean, look at this man in middle school, what were they feeding him? The anime actually kind of struggles to maintain this flexing notion, because flexing doesn't change someone's height, but for some reason he's always drawn to be shorter when he's in his deflated form in the anime, when he's the same height regardless, canonically and in the manga. It can kind of make you forget that this really isn't a part of One For All, which I don't like. Let my man be tall!
There's plenty of fear behind that smile.
This is a great line for establishing more of All Might's character. It adds some depth to the symbol that both the audience and Izuku have seen so far, and also loops back around to showing that Izuku's view of heroism, while pure and noble, is idealized, like I mentioned before.
Pretty gross, right? I got this in a big fight 5 years back. My respiratory system was basically destroyed. I lost my whole stomach.
This scene already works to establish All For One in only the second episode of the series. That question of who could have done that to All Might, the guy who instantly took this villain down and is Japan's #1 hero, is now in your mind. I also just like how gruesome the scar looks. It kind of helps ground this fantastical world in some sense of reality. You can't just come back from a giant wound like that, it leaves its impact. And that idea continues throughout the show. Izuku gets a ton of scars across the series, along with many other characters, which both serves as a cool visual indicator of them growing over time, and the battles they fought, but also as a reminder that their actions have consequences. So many anime just have characters fully heal after battles with no visual damage, but My Hero deliberately doesn't, and I love that.
Right now I can only do hero work for about 3 hours a day.
His mouth is not moving in this scene. Yeah, I caught you, Bones Animator, in 2016. Ha! I showed them. Okay, but actually this entire scene is weirdly stagnant. It's a little odd.
5 years ago? So does that mean it was the fight with Toxic Chainsaw?
If you've ever wondered what Toxic Chainsaw looks like, here you go. This was released in the Ultra Analysis book and a character design page, which also contains Sansa with the gun. And back to Toxic Chainsaw, he was also referenced in Deadpool Samurai, so that's fun. And on the topic, since I doubt I'll ever organically bring up Deadpool Samurai again, right after he's referenced, there's a chapter where All Might appears in full, drawn by Horikoshi himself, where Deadpool and All Might team up to take down Thanos. It's pretty wild. This also has a direct reference to episode 1 of the anime, where Izuku says that All Might's signature would be a family heirloom, and so does Deadpool. Way later in the manga, they also reference Dobby's dance, which is fun. One last thing, this manga introduces Sakura Spider, who many have pointed out looks to be a reference to, or inspired by Ochako in some way, and I'm inclined to agree, especially with the crossover, though this has never been confirmed to my knowledge. Okay, back to the episode now.
Pro heroes are always having to risk their lives. Some villains just can't be beaten without powers. So no, I honestly don't think you can become a hero without a quirk.
I really like how organically this talk plays out. You think he may have shown Izuku's scar because he wanted to give reasoning for this form, but no, it loops back around to Izuku's question about being a hero really organically. And when All Might says he can't, it hurts. We really feel for Izuku here because of all we've seen him go through. But of course that's the opinion All Might holds. It's logical, and I mean he has a point. A lot of what we see Izuku go through couldn't have been done quirkless. That isn't to say there can't ever be a quirkless hero, but in regards to the type that Izuku wants to be specifically, it would be exceptionally hard.
I see.
Izuku's reaction to being told he can't be a hero is really fucking good. Not only his frozen in shock silence, but also his seemingly gut instinct of going to the scene of the villain attack being immediately crushed by All Might's words really does a good job at emphasizing how much of a loss this is to him. Also feed imagery! The charge-up sound again. You could even hear the electricity during the punch itself. I think it's in fact safe to say that his quirk isn't just strength. Weirdly though, both times this happens is in an anime-only scene. Also, I just want to bring attention to this sick-ass manga panel I've never seen anyone mention before.
With a quirk like yours under my control, I can take All Might down with one punch!
No! No, you could not.
My only weakness! I need at least a two-lane road if I'm gonna make my way through here!
Why doesn't Mount Lady shrink down here? Is she stupid? No, but actually, if she shrunk down, ran in, grabbed Bakugo, and grew, she probably could have saved him pretty easily here. So, oops. Generally, this is a pretty incompetent showing from the heroes, even outside of just Mount Lady. Calmly Woods could at least try and grab Bakugo out of there with his arms, or poke the sludge villain in the eye at least. Backdraft could fire water into him, diluting him like Mina does in Season 7, which may work even without the acid element. And Death Orbs could try pulling Bakugo out with super strength at the very least. Blink and you'll miss it, but Bakugo's friends are actually being carried by Kamui Woods here, and are up on this building in this shot, which is pretty neat.
Better to find out now instead of later, I guess.
I am not translating this by hand. I would be here all day if I did, but here's Google's best attempt. It's not great, but we can glean a few things from it. For starters, Izuku points out that he has a flower chain, which I did not notice before, so clearly he is better at this than me. Other than that, this is pretty standard and talks about his lacquered chain prison, which is actually the section he references later on in this episode before throwing his backpack at the sludge villain. Mount Lady is a little more interesting. He notes that she stretches to the 7th floor of a building and that she has smooth hair, and notes her lack of shoes, and like, true. You'd think being as large as her, she'd want extra feet protection. On the other page, he also questions if gigantification can be freely controlled, which is actually answered by this other scene we saw earlier with her not being able to fit in the alleyway, meaning she can't freely control it.
I'm the one to blame. He wasted his energy on me.
I'm worthless.
All Might and Izuku both blaming themselves is really interesting because not only does it draw a pretty obvious parallel between them, but it also begins to show how they shoulder the burden of things even when it's not fully their fault. Not once does All Might blame Izuku for latching onto him, interfering with his hero work, and vice versa, with Izuku not blaming All Might for not keeping him secure as the adult pro-hero on the scene. Whereas in reality, they both cause this in some way. If Izuku didn't latch on, it probably wouldn't have happened, but if All Might paid more attention or called the police from here, it wouldn't have happened either. It's really good character writing to establish that burden of responsibility they both face early, as it's something that Izuku really has to work to overcome much later in the series, and something All Might is also shown to struggle with as a symbol of peace. This is obviously a huge step for Izuku, both in the story and as a character. This is his first heroic act, and it couldn't be better set up. Not only has he been told time and time again that he couldn't be a hero, but the person in need is Bakugo. And yet despite that, he still has that heroic instinct to act, to move without thinking. And it's to save his bully against the monster who nearly killed him in the same day. That is true heroic selflessness. He had every right to leave Bakugo like that. Hell, it might have even been the more rational thing to do since he has no powers, but because his heart is one of a true hero, he couldn't just stand there idly by. That instinct of heroism being the thing that saved Bakugo, even if indirectly, is incredible. On top of that as well, his fight analysis comes in handy right away, his passion finally paying off. And our first instance of Yusei Run is there as a cherry on top. When All Might lifts off the ground to go save Izuku and Bakugo from the villain, there's like this tin pencil holder here. I imagine this may have been placed here to help the viewer discern that this is All Might who's moving since it has this color scheme. But also, I just checked the scene again, and this is actually the thing that hits the slime villain in the eye when Izuku throws his backpack, so it's Izuku's pencil holder. That's some insane attention to detail for a shot that lasts for only a moment.
I couldn't just stand there and watch you die!
One dub change I didn't initially mention in my episode, but I figured I should have probably brought up, thank you to this commenter for reminding me, is that Izuku's line here is changed from the line, "You looked like you needed saving," which not only comes back much later on in Season 6, but it also just shows a bit more directly what Izuku's heroic ideals are at this point. I will say though, the dub does have the benefit of emphasizing that he's willing to specifically save Bakugo, even when we've seen all the bullying that he's done to him. I do think generally the subline works better, even outside of the parallel, but I don't think the dub is like a ton weaker because of the change here. I think it still works at conveying what needed to be conveyed. Okay, this may be a stretch, but hear me out. I think this entire scene is a loose parallel to the fight with All for One, but on a smaller scale. Izuku is directly what led to All Might winning, with something he learned from Izuku, in this instance being reminded of his ideals. Then, after winning, he holds up his fist and stumbles. I don't know if any of that's intentional, I just think it's kind of a neat idea.
Collected all the scattered mounds of sludge, and the villain went into police custody where he belonged.
A little weird that this guy could be contained in 2 soda bottles before, but now needs at least 12 full trash bags. It's possible he grew a little bit in the streetway, but I always imagine that you only need to contain a part of him, because otherwise how the hell did All Might stuff his entire form into 2 bottles after blowing him away like that?
Listen, I would never ask for a weakling like you to help me. Don't think you can look down on me! Huh? Got that? I was fine by myself!
Here's Bakugo's inferiority complex on a more obvious display. I went into it last episode, but he fears people looking down on him like he looks down on others, and Izuku's display of heroism obviously made him insecure. He doesn't like Izuku having a one-up on him, so he tries to get back on top immediately by saying he didn't help at all, because he fears someone like Izuku, a quirkless weakling in his eyes, being superior to him.
You told me you didn't have a power, so when I saw this timid, quirkless boy try to save a life, it inspired me to act too.
This is an important line because it's the first time Izuku's actions inspired another person to do better, to act. Izuku's character moving forward is an interesting one because Izuku in this episode is already proven to have the heart of a true hero. So, what character development can someone have if they're already perfect? Well, they themselves develop other people's characters. That's not to say Izuku's a static protagonist. He goes through immense physical growth throughout the series, and does have emotional arcs as well, which are great, but his heart is always in the right place from the beginning, so a big part of his character is being an inspiration to others, the catalyst for other people to act. Whereas All Might, the symbol of peace, took the approach of acting as a deterrent for villains themselves, and made people feel safe through his presence alone, Izuku takes the approach of inspiring others to be better and to help each other, which in the long run is a stronger approach to a society like this, as one man cannot save everyone. I won't go too much into it here, as I'll discuss it more going forward, but I think this dynamic makes Izuku a really interesting protagonist who doesn't get nearly enough credit for what he does in this series by a lot of people.
Their bodies moved before they had a chance to think, almost on their own.
I mean, what is there even to say about the scene as a whole? It's just perfect. All this character establishment stuff I've been talking about, this is what makes this moment. It's incredibly powerful, even emotional as a first-time watcher, and hell, it still makes me feel things even when I've watched this scene enough times that I've lost count. It works because of how well Izuku's character has been established across these 2 episodes. All his life, he was put down, made fun of, bullied, and even his own mom didn't think he could achieve his own dream. But despite all of that, he's told by the person he idolizes most that he inspired him to act. And then, he's told by that same person the thing that no one else would.
Young man, you too can become a hero.
This scene is one of my favorites in My Hero. It isn't a fight, it isn't anything flashy, It's just a conversation, and the fact that that conversation can be this emotionally powerful only 2 episodes in is a testament to how brilliantly written these characters are. Scenes like this, characters like this, are why I love My Hero Academia. And that's episode 2. This and the first episode are such a great opening to this series, it's actually insane. Some people like to say My Hero Academia wasn't great from the start, but oh man, I beg to differ. These first 2 episodes are so good, and they fit together like 2 halves of one whole, which makes sense when you know that this is all adapting the first chapter of the manga. This episode just pays off a bunch of the setup in the first episode with grace and continues to build up these characters and world excellently before hitting you right in the feels. But that's it for this episode. Next is Season 1, Episode 3, Roaring Muscles.
The world's most popular hero, All Might.
That's interesting, because most of the time he's referred to as Japan's #1 hero, likely because that's where he ranks in the Billboard charts, but it does beg the question of if he is the world's most popular hero. This line would have you believe that, but the sub says #1, likely referring to the charts again. But considering how much influence he has worldwide, with Stars and Stripes, the United States is #1, being very openly inspired by him, he could very well be the most popular worldwide, even if this line specifically isn't true confirmation.
I deem you worthy of my power. My quirk is yours to inherit.
So, does All Might picking Izuku to wield One for All make sense? I think so. I've seen people argue that All Might is stupid for picking a random 14-year-old, but I think with All Might's current mindset, it makes perfect sense. He sees himself in Izuku, for starters, them both being born quirkless and wanting to be heroes despite that setback. Plus, Izuku acted, in All Might's words, like a true hero despite the fact that he is quirkless, something once again he did himself when he was younger. But I think the biggest factor here is the fact that All Might thinks All for One is dead. These are peaceful times where crime rates are down and villain attacks are nothing more than an inconvenience. Passing the torch of One for All down to All Might is less of a necessity and more so an opportunity to have someone usurp him. So why not give that opportunity to someone that wouldn't have had much of a chance otherwise? If All Might knew All for One was still around, I could see All Might not taking that chance, but in the context of the world as he knows it, I think it's perfectly logical, especially with Night Eye's prediction of All Might's demise drawing closer.
Journalists always guess my quirk is super strength or some kind of invulnerability. When people ask in interviews, I always make a joke and dodge the question.
It's interesting to me that All Might didn't just say super strength, which is essentially what One for All is to him. Hell, even Izuku put his quirk down as just super power and no one questioned it. If I was in his shoes, I wouldn't even allow it to be a debate if it was that big of a secret. Maybe he just doesn't like lying or something.
Yes, Wei. And you're next. I can give you my abilities.
His scar here doesn't have the purple coloring it did before, which I'd say was likely to make it easier to animate, but the wound is actually still here, so I don't know. I will say it's interesting to have him saying "you're next" as it shows his scar, almost kind of foreshadowing that Izuku will face the person who gave him that wound eventually. Also, him saying "you're next" is possibly a setup for when he says it after the fight with All for One, though that connection is lost in the dub since he doesn't say "you're next" after the fight in it.
The idea of passing on a quirk or inheriting it just doesn't make any sense to me. I've never heard anything like that before.
Are you seriously telling me this quirk nerd doesn't know at least the rumors of All for One and him being able to transfer quirks? Oh wait! He does!
In the blink of an eye, he became the leader of villains and ruled over Japan.
I've seen plenty of rumors about this online, sure, but isn't that all just made up? It's not mentioned in our textbooks.
Well, it said that he was wiped from the history books. It's still weird that Izuku thinks the possibility of transferring abilities is impossible, especially with him having heard the rumors before. Plus, because quirks are already genetic, it doesn't really feel like as much of a leap as Izuku's making it out to be here. Hell, we see in the series that even common people have the ability to affect quirks like Eraserhead and Monoma, though they can only do it temporarily.
I was on a long hunt for a worthy successor.
That line is kind of interesting just to think about. It's fair to assume that he started looking for a candidate right after his injury from the battle with All for One. It's surprising that it took him this long to find someone. Though, with how much of himself he sees in Izuku, it's not really hard to see why he chose him.
Seriously, you gotta stop crying so much if you want my quirk. Come on, kid.
Weird line change from All Might here to the dub, where in the dub he tells Izuku to stop crying, and in the sub he reaffirms that it's his choice to choose the power or not. I don't mind it, I just find the major line changes interesting. I feel like they were way more liberal with them early on in the series, though the "come on kid" feels a little bit out of character for him.
But it wasn't that simple. Receiving All Might's power turned out to be no easy task, as I'd soon find out.
I really like the aspect of One for All where Izuku has to really work for it, beyond just proving himself to have the heart of a hero. And I'm not exclusively talking about this training montage either, though this is the start of that. He spends 10 months training his body just to be able to wield it, and I mean, we see how that goes the first time he uses it. This physical struggle of his powers is kind of played as his main arc throughout the story, aside from his inspiration of others. He struggles, has setbacks, but has to work to control it. It's a good visual way of showing how much he does manage to go throughout the series. It's kind of reminiscent of Aang from Avatar in a way. They both spend the bulk of the series trying to master their abilities to achieve their main goal, and they both start off as explicitly morally good characters. Though once again, this doesn't mean that they don't have those emotional struggles as well. In both cases though, their characters would largely suffer from stagnation if they started the series being masters of their craft. That doesn't mean they'd be bad characters, just less interesting to watch ones. I'll go even more into it next episode when he actually uses the quirk, but I think it was really smart to make the quirk function the way it does because of how it ties into his character like this.
Assuming I'll be resting 2 days between each hard workout, then...
Whoa, it's his pencil holder from last episode. Super cool continuity. Though I do wonder if he actually got it back after it got blown away or if he just happened to have a spare one.
Also, I'll need to make sure I'm hitting every muscle group, which means I need to pay attention to the type of work I'm doing on the beach every day. I could start sneaking in extra work.
Unsurprising, but a good chunk of these students are ones from his homeroom class in the first episode. With the exception of maybe this one, I can't find an exact hair match there. I also like the detail of Bakugo being the only one not looking back at Izuku, either out of pettiness over his help with the sludge villain, or just because he's used to Izuku mumbling since they've known each other since they were kids. Oh my god, yes, another clock, finally! Well, luckily, this clock, despite being a little iffy on the hand placement, makes sense. It's around 2:25 a.m. They're wearing different uniforms here, which I believe indicates that it's turned from spring to summer. Cool detail. Then in a later scene, they've changed back into their original uniforms, which is a cool way of showing part of that passage of time. Good lord, the amount of upper body strength that Izuku would require to do this is absurd. All Might said earlier this episode that he weighs 550 pounds, which is insane. Izuku, please don't herniate a disc. Speaking from experience, it's not good. I like to quickly appreciate the sheer amount of outfits Izuku wears throughout this training montage. Wears a ton of different shirts and pants and stuff, which doesn't add a whole lot on the surface, but it does convey, again, a good passage of time, which is important when you're doing this long of a montage. Also, Izuku's shirts are very funny. He has a pajama shirt, a Y shirt, a shirt. His fashion sense is impeccable. Maybe I'm digging too deep into this, but it's a cool detail anyways. All Might being on a Segway here is an interesting contrast to later in the series after he decides to live. Him not running alongside Izuku and instead letting him run on his own is emblematic of All Might's current mindset. He thinks he's gonna die within the next year or so anyway, so who cares about doing some jogging. It may have been lucky coincidence, but I think this detail makes All Might's later scenes of him running a bit more impactful having seen him like this.
I don't just want into UA, I want to excel. I want to be like you!
So this is the first example of Izuku being inspired by All Might to a fault. He overworks himself on the expectation of wanting to go plus ultra, without taking into account what that means for his personal health, much like All Might does with him constantly pushing his time limits or refusing to retire despite his condition. It's interesting because while this could be considered a character flaw, the show doesn't consider it one, yet. Clearly displayed as a positive thing here, with it playing triumphant music and All Might encouraging Izuku, though at least All Might does tell Izuku that he shouldn't be doing it. Later on in the show, though, it does reframe this admiration to be a character flaw. They're once again planting these small seeds that are going to be capitalized on in the future without you even realizing it.
Hey, holy crap, kid. You even cleaned up outside the area I told you to.
Once again, more evidence for my last point with their bad habits being encouraged by one another. They're almost too similar. This, again, is completely intentional, and really good character establishment for both of them.
Holy stinking super crap!
The line in the sub is, "Oh my goodness," which is far better in my opinion, though the dub line is admittedly kind of funny in an absurd way. But see what I mean about their more liberal use of script changes? This type of change would be torn up by the fandom if it was done in a modern episode.
I knew you had it in you, but this is beyond.
Plus ultra?
There's a difference between being lucky and deserving. One's an accident, the other a reward. Never get the two confused.
Not only is this just some cool advice, but it also directly refutes this weird idea that some people have that Izuku was just gifted this power. I don't know why people think that. I think the amount of Izuku hate juice got to their heads. But genuinely, it's a great speech. Seeing Izuku also being worried that he's still not worthy is fairly interesting. Once again, showing a lack of self-worth. Also, the hair pit is very good. I don't think it takes away from the speech at all. It's just funny. Though it does raise the question of how Yoichi passed it on to Kudo. They were awfully close, Huh? Sharing DNA?
You'll be late for the exam! Eat!
Feet imagery, but this time the shoes are off of him. Maybe symbolizing him leaving his quirkless status behind? I don't know. Cool visuals nonetheless. More fuel for Red Shoe Theory.
I was so worried about missing the exam that I didn't have a chance to test out my new power.
Honestly, kind of lucky he didn't, because if he did and broke his arm, he likely wouldn't have made it to the exam at all. But also, really, why didn't All Might give it to him the day before the exam?
I stopped you with my quirk.
Ochako puts her hands together here to release her quirk's effects, which wouldn't be noticed on a first watch through. Pretty cool. I like her introduction here in general. It's fairly simple, but it shows off her immediate desire to help people with her saving Izuku from falling, which is also probably foreshadowing for next episode, and showcases her kind and bubbly personality right away. Makes her pretty instantly likable. It's very funny to me that the only people who are drawn here are Izuku, Bakugo, and Iida. Like, why? It's very odd. I also like the joke of the audience's lack of call and response. Though if you're applying to UA, these students better get on that.
I listen to his radio show every day of the week. It's so crazy nuts that all the UA teachers are shut up.
I really like the dynamic between these two in these scenes. This may be more in line with how they normally act around each other rather than the over-the-top stuff in the first episode. This characterization is just more true to Bakugo in my opinion. This correction this early is also good for his character arc, because if he was still as mean as he was in the first episode here, then it would have been a much harder sell to redeem him over the course of their first year at UA. The time skip also helps with that.
Okay, let's check out your targets. There are 3 types of foe villains in every battle center. You'll earn points based on their level of difficulty, so better choose wisely.
Here's a fairly big change from the manga to the anime. Well, in the anime they make vague game terms and kind of just gamify the pre-existing robots. In the manga, Mario is used as a direct comparison instead. Also, while it's not absolute peak pixel art, I appreciate when shows actually take the time to make it look like pixel art and not use dreaded mixels.
Additionally, you with the unkempt hair. You've been muttering this entire time. Stop that. If you can't bother to take this seriously, leave. You're distracting the rest of us.
So our introduction to Iida is interesting. Well, it does a fairly good job at showing off his more authoritarian personality. I do feel like it's a little bit too in that direction to be in line with his character later on. Well, he probably would be the kind of person to ask someone to stop muttering. I don't think Iida would call someone out by telling them that they have unkempt hair. However, this is right before an exam, so it could be excused by just saying he was under some stress. I simply like how the end music transitions into the credits. And with that, that's the end of the episode. Definitely not quite as much to pick apart this time, but still a fairly solid episode. I think it does suffer a little bit from the breakneck pace of the manga in this section, rushing to get through the training, and while they do a good job at conveying the passage of time, I think maybe having an episode fully dedicated to the 10 months of hell, as Izuku describes, may have been a little better for the overall pacing of the season. There's also a tad bit of mischaracterization here with Iida, but on the other hand, Bakugo's characterization was really well handled this episode, overall kind of leading it to balance out its problems with its strengths. But enough training, let's see Izuku in action in Season 1, Episode 4, Start Line.
The hallowed grounds of UA. There are similar programs out there, but they don't hold a candle to UA's.
It is kind of implied later on that Shiketsu does somewhat hold a candle to UA, though that aspect isn't explored too much in general. We don't ever actually see it, so it's kind of hard to compare. But I do have a feeling Izuku may be a little biased in the narration here. Here we see 7 full fake cities, which is a little excessive if I'm being honest, but definitely a flex from UA for sure.
How come none of these guys seem nervous at all?
Here, we fairly obviously see Shoji and Aoyama waiting for the exam, which is fun. We see Aoyama later as well, but Shoji is pretty much just here and in a small shot on the cams later. But what's truly insane about this is the statistical improbability of the amount of students in 1A coming from this one battleground. Like I mentioned, they have 7 battlegrounds total, and here in this one, we have Izuku, Iida, Ochako, Aoyama, and Shoji. With 20 students, you'd have an average of about 3, but if you take into account the fact that 2 of them got in on recommendations, then that drops to about 2.5. So this is double the average from a battleground. But those odds get even worse when you find out that this person might be Kirishima. If you aren't aware, Kirishima has naturally black hair, and it's shown in a flashback during season 4 that he still had it during the entrance exam. And they share a pretty good resemblance here. He isn't in this scene in the manga, but he might be the person getting 32 points here, as the manga shows someone breaking a robot with their arms in the flashback as well. Another thing that makes it a little bit more likely for this to be him is that friends don't get paired up, and Mina is nowhere to be seen here. This is overall pretty coincidental, and their tracksuit colors don't match, but that's probably just because Bones, and honestly probably Hori, didn't plan it back then. I feel like if they did, it would be more obvious. I like the idea of it being him, but you can kind of take it or leave it. But I just wanted to point out that if it is him, then that makes the improbability even more improbable, with 6 of 18 students from 1A coming from one of the 7 stadiums. Though, to yap even more about this point, it's always possible that the students were selected for 1A and 1B, not at random, but through these, with the first 3 being 1A and the last 3 being 1B, and the middle probably being both. Considering we know Izuku and Bakugo go to the A and B cities, it's possible. Plus, it not being completely random would make pretty reasonable sense, so that you're more likely to have met someone going into the class at the entrance exam. Anyway, so Aoyama and Shoji are in this scene. It's shown that people are behind Izuku here, and hell, Iida is right next to him, so Izuku must have been really tunnel visioned on present Mike here to not see or hear them all running away. Gotta work on that, man. Though, to be totally fair to Izuku, it's kind of shown that the door isn't in front of him, so at least they wouldn't be running past him. I always kind of thought Present Mike was, like, on the wall of the city, but because of that, I don't think he is. I think he might be standing on the observation deck we see everyone in later, but to be fair to me this time, you don't see an observation deck on the map view earlier, unless it's this or something, but that seems kind of far away for that to be the case.
After all, I've got All Might's power in me.
I didn't really process it last episode, but why did someone vandalize this sign to play tic-tac-toe, only to quit after the second move? If you're gonna vandalize it, at least finish the game, man.
You swallowed it, yes?
I like how the fact that they've moved from the beach up to here implies that it took longer to convince Izuku to eat the hair than what we saw on screen. I never really processed that before. Also, he has put his shoes on before swallowing it. My point last episode is moot. Red Shoe Theorist, I failed you.
It should kick in after 2, maybe 3 hours.
Do I have to analyze digital clocks also? No, right? No. Let's just go with no.
32 for me.
I said earlier that in the manga this line may be being said by Kirishima, and it kind of sounds like him here. Not really, but like it's not like they could have known. Let me dream, okay?
No idea how many villains are present.
This is, I believe, the first instance of Aoyama looking directly into the camera. Also, how are they getting these shots of the students? Drones? Fast, small, unobtrusive drones?
I'd say this year's group looks promising.
Well, there's still plenty of time before it's over.
You don't see them on screen, but this is pretty clearly Midnight talking. And I believe the other voice might be Snipe, though he may be maskless here since he doesn't have the usual distortion on his voice. We see Ochako stopping herself from throwing up, showing her quirk overuse in effect before she throws up later in the episode. Cool small setup for that. So, like, not to point out the obvious, but what exactly was the protocol here if Izuku didn't step in? Recovery Girl can't recover a corpse. Surely Ochako wouldn't have just died, right? Nezu has proper precautions for this, right? This see-through effect is pretty cool. I don't think we ever see it again. In the future, if it has red lines at all, it normally just goes on top of the clothes here on out. I don't mind it too much though, because it's a good way to emphasize and put impact into his first use of the quirk.
So clench your butt cheeks, kid, and yell this from the depths of your heart!
This line was actually said earlier.
So I want you to clench your butt cheeks and yell this from the depths of your heart.
But this time it's a different take entirely with more intensity, and instead of All Might being cut off, Izuku speaks with him, saying the words before fully taking over during the smash. It's pretty neat, kind of audibly showing him taking the advice All Might gave.
There are no combat points rewarded for taking on that humongous villain.
So this entire scene is basically a direct parallel to the slime villain, as Izuku actually points out in a bit. Thanks for taking my job, man. Both times he moves on instinct to save someone, but now he has not just the will, but the power to save. This combined with Yusei Run playing its second time makes these two linked in such a unique way in the story. They both serve a very similar purpose, but it works because having this direct comparison between him when he's powerless and him when he has One for All shows not only how powerful the quirk is, but how much Izuku's actions can change things when he has the power to back his convictions up. That combined with the excellent build-up and weight to the animation of Izuku punching the robot creates an extremely satisfying first use of the power.
Nothing is nobler than self-sacrifice.
All Might says nothing is more noble than self-sacrifice, which is an interesting look into his ideals, and while it may be true to an extent, it's also a notion that's kind of challenged as the series goes on. Putting the burden on entirely yourself and making sure no one else has to worry is the idea that All Might built his symbol with, a symbol that's shown to be flawed when it can't be upheld. I'll go into that more later, but also, did Izuku, know this would happen? Is it really self-sacrifice if he didn't mean to break 75% of his limbs? I guess it's sacrificing his time to get points to an extent, but otherwise, not sure about it. His overall fall here feels really slow, which isn't a big deal, but he falls for nearly 2 minutes straight, and especially this shot, it just feels a little off. I think if they made him falling in slow motion with his thoughts, it would have made it a little less obvious. Also, God, the arm flapping in the wind is gross in a good way. You can't trick me, show. Ochako is nowhere near where Izuku's falling in any of these shots. How did she get there in time? Aside from that, it's cool that Ochako raised herself up on the robot part so that Izuku had time to slow down. Her managing to slap something moving at terminal velocity, though, is pretty lucky as well. Speaking of which, with how her quirk does work, making things weightless, wouldn't that not stop Izuku's descent? Sure, her slap might send him off course, but I think he'd still be going too fast. Unless Ochako's quirk does have an effect that slows all inertia on something as well as remove its gravity. I'll have to pay more attention to how it works going forward, because from what's been shown, I don't think it can be classified as just removing gravity from something. Anyways, this moment in general is great, aside from the quirk confusion. Her saving Izuku from falling being set up last episode, and them both saving each other here is a great start to their character dynamic.
Did you see that dude's attack? I didn't think he had that kind of strength.
I think the amount of training Izuku does, only for it to still break him that badly, makes for a really good storytelling device. Like I said in episode 2, a large part of Izuku's character isn't about the growth of his ideals or his internal struggles, because he had to be proven to be a true hero to have All Might choose him in the first place. Again, not to say he doesn't have character growth, but it's not the biggest focus of his character, especially in these early seasons. So having this physical struggle of getting One for All under control gives that needed depth to his character. The way he grows in both physical muscle mass and through wits makes it a compelling journey to see him make this power his own throughout the first 5 seasons. In addition to that, his self-sacrificial nature, playing into his self-destructive power, makes for a great dynamic where he keeps pushing himself for the sake of others in spite of himself, which leads to some of his character growth later on. You may think it's a stretch saying this so early, but this lack of personal care has already been established throughout these last 4 episodes subtly, with him worrying about Bakugo getting in trouble for bullying him putting all the blame of the slime monster escaping onto himself, him running into the slime monster without thinking and without power, him pushing himself too far during training, him cleaning up the whole beach instead of just the part assigned to him, and now breaking most of his limbs to save one person. He is selfless to a fault, putting the burden of things solely on his own shoulders just like All Might. While selflessness is no doubt a heroic trait, he takes it too far, and that will continue to happen to more and more extremes as he now has that power to push himself further.
Reward yourselves. Have some gummy.
Small change from the manga to the anime. Recovery Girl in the manga is giving out specifically Haribo candy, which is a candy brand that does stuff like gummy bears. In the anime, they still use gummy bears, but it's just a generic gummy.
It's as though his body isn't used to handling his own power at all.
Seeing as Recovery Girl knows about One for All, I do wonder if this is her piecing together that Izuku is the next holder of it, though that may be a stretch, especially with no past users having had that happen to them.
Her quirk is a Trey awesome boost of healing power.
Considering what we learn later about her quirk, that healing too much can cause death if you're too tired, the fact that she used this after the exam and after Izuku finished cleaning the beach, this easily could have killed him. I'm surprised Recovery Girl even risked healing him that much at once. Clock spotted! You thought you could hide it from me, anime? Well, no such luck today. This one is, to my surprise, accurate. It's around 8 p.m., which makes sense. Why is the one you barely see here actually right, and the one that's the focus of the first shot of the show not? I'll never understand their clock priorities.
You're seriously going to be working at UA?
This is mostly implied to be pre-recorded, seeing as he has to do a bunch more, but he clearly reacts to Izuku here. Did he just predict not only what Izuku would say, but that Izuku would talk to the message? Wow.
You got 0 combat points in the practical exam. Sorry.
All Might has way too much dramatic flair. He paused and let Izuku seep in his thoughts for 15 whole seconds before revealing that it's fine. God, I can't stand him. I love him.
It's hard to describe his face. He's kind of plain looking. Doesn't really stand out or anything, you know?
She means me.
Aside from this really funny line, this line got me thinking about something, because Izuku isn't really plain, right? Like, he has green hair, for God's sake. But then I thought about it, and I think green hair may just be a natural hair color in this world. I mean, he has it as a kid. His mom has green hair. Ragdoll has green hair. Asui has green hair. Toguro, Ibara, Setsuna, Mrs. Joke, Night-Eye, Burnin, kinda. These two from the movies, like, genuinely, this hair color is more common than being a ginger in this universe, so I think it's actually fair to call him plain, even if he isn't to us, the viewer. It's pretty interesting.
Please, sir. Can't you just give him my points?
This is a huge aspect of Vichako's character being set up here. While at this point in time, her motivations are likely fueled a lot by her later declaration to earn money for her parents, this is showing a bit of what her drive turns into by the end of the series, that being someone who wants to help others. She has the drive and wants to help Izuku, which is a huge show for her character. It's also one of the first time Izuku inspires another person to be good. Him saving her, with, to his knowledge, no benefit to himself, inspires her to act selflessly too.
Reject someone who is committed to saving others, no matter the consequences to himself.
Once again, something that will be challenged later in the series being presented as something good. Because, no, Izuku breaking 3/4 of his limbs to save someone wasn't good, even if it worked. It was reckless, frankly. But it being presented in this way makes you have the mindset the characters do right now as well, which makes for a more interesting shift later when those ideals are challenged by the show. That being said, the rescue points are a great twist that make complete sense. It's completely logical for them to not tell the students about it so they can accurately grade. It feels earned by the show, and it makes him getting into UA not feel cheap. Kirishima getting 35 rescue points is so him, oh my god. I love that detail. And he's second overall just behind Bakugo. That's cool.
You have made it. You're now part of the Hero Academia.
This really was Boku no My Hero Academia.
My life has changed completely.
This shot may be a parallel to the first episode where after his dreams were crushed, it was laying flat on the desk. It's now shown standing up after Izuku finally achieved his dreams. Or at least started to. And that's the end of the episode. I quite like this one. I think it's lighthearted enough to be really fun, even in the face of Izuku doing awfully at the exam. But it still treats those lows with a certain gravitas that you like to see. Him using his quirk for the first time is great and wonderfully animated, and it just hits all the beats it needs to without being too drawn out. The exam itself felt like the perfect length. It's just a really solid episode overall. Now, let's reach the Academia in My Hero Academia in Season 1, Episode 5, What I Can Do For Now.
He took down those faux villains like an ace.
Despite being framed as a flashback, these Bakugo scenes are all completely new. Also, as pointed out by this commenter last time, the outfit Bakugo is wearing strikes a pretty good resemblance to his hero costume.
But at what cost? Did you see how badly he injured himself?
Holy shit, twice?!
The 7th place student had 0 villain points.
There's a pretty big difference between the dialogue in the anime compared to the manga here. Namely, there's a gag with, I assume, Present Mike saying that Izuku makes him go, yeah! As well as the first bit kind of having more of an announcer tone like a sports game rather than a casual conversation. Small omission from the manga, but Izuku's beach cleaning actually made the newspaper.
Seemed like fortuitous timing. An easy way to find someone new to inherit One for All.
What's interesting about this is that we know later on that the biggest person in consideration before Izuku was likely Mirio, but this line implies that All Might wanted to have more options on top of him. I wonder who of 1A or hell the other grades he would have gone with if it wasn't for Izuku. Honestly, I feel like Kirishima would be a pretty strong contender. I won't speculate too much here though.
You knew I was gonna get hurt that badly?
Well, we were in a time crunch, but it turned out alright.
Honestly, really interesting that All Might basically implies that he had the same struggles with the power as Izuku here, when we know that isn't the case. I like to think that All Might didn't want Izuku to worry about him being who was chosen here, so he just kind of did a little bit of a lie.
Look, it really is All Might.
No way, what are you...
How did he keep this a secret for as long as he did?
It's the first day and you're already disrespecting this academy by scuffing school property, you cretin!
I feel like this scene and the few after it are a much better introduction to Iida as a character than anything in the entrance exam was. Not only is it funny, but it sets up Iida's respect for the school he's in. It also shows how he responds to those that don't follow that. It also shows he's humble, admitting being mistaken about his idea of Izuku before and apologizing. This isn't his whole character, but this is a really good introduction to it.
Oh my gosh, it's that nice girl who talked to me. She looks
Hard to make out, but she says, "So President Mike was right, you did pass the practical exam." Anyways, outside of that, this interaction is really cute. I don't think I have much to add, but Izuku immediately trying to thank Ochako is really sweet. Alright, this is the scene I talked about during episode 1. This more grounded bullying, out of the teacher's sight, less actual power usage, I think is way better at showing what the dynamic between Bakugo and Izuku was before UA. This is way more compelling to me. If we had a scene like this, where after class Bakugo went to bully Izuku after the teacher had left, it would have been much more of an impactful establishment than what we got.
Kacchan?
This is the very first time we see Izuku standing up to Bakugo, and we can see that immediate slight fear in Bakugo's eyes when it happens. This is a result of his inferiority complex finally having ground to stand on. Up until now, Izuku was exactly what he wanted him to be. Weak, quirkless, unlikely to follow him to UA, but here, Bakugo is seeing something more. Even without a quirk, the fact that he's willing to stand up to him scares Bakugo, even if it's only slightly.
It took 8 seconds before you all shut up. That's not gonna work. Time is precious.
Aizawa's introduction is also really good, but what's interesting is how this is how he intends to be seen. This isn't our introduction to Aizawa, the character. This is our introduction to Mr. Eraserhead, the teacher, a hard-ass, no-time-for-nothing, deadpan guy, and this scene gets that across really well. I think it's really clever to have the audience introduced to Aizawa pretty much the same way the students are. This allows our assumptions about him to evolve alongside the students, which makes for a lot of great moments later on where we see the semi-facade that he's putting on slowly peeled back to reveal more of the normal humanity behind him.
At 50 meters, I can only get up to 3rd gear.
Are gears ever referenced again in relation to his quirk? I don't think so, right? He's less of a car and more of just an engine. This could just be internal terminology he's using, but I don't think he mentions gears again from here on out.
I'll lighten up my clothes. Oh, and my shoes too.
Now this begs a question. In the future, she can affect the gravity of people when touching just their clothes. So is her power partially based off of the intent of what she wants to affect? Because otherwise it would just make the clothes on top of something weightless, which is kind of not that helpful. Easy to miss, but Ashido is actually skating on her acid here. She even took her shoes off to do it. She also uses acid as skates in the sports festival and beyond, so it's cool to see it all the way back here.
Shooting my beautiful beam for more than a second hurts my tummy.
Obviously this is huge setup for something way later down the road, but I'll talk about it more when there's more obvious examples for it. But yes, this is the first time it shows up.
My power has more uses than anyone else's in this school.
Well, I'm not sure I would agree as a whole. I mean, Momo can literally make anything. In these tests, I would actually agree. At the level the other students are at, I can't see someone being able to perform these specific tasks at a higher level than him. I don't really have a good time to bring this up because it's all over the chapter, but in the manga we see how Izuku's results compare to middle school, and it's cool seeing how he's just improved from his training, often scoring a good chunk higher in these tests. Also, everyone brings up this moment as evidence of bisexual Mineta, but here he calls Shoji sexy. It's been under our noses this whole time. Pretty obvious, but I like the detail of the clouds moving slightly and the sky getting a bit darker as the time skips here.
I won't let them down!
The subversion of Yusei Run here is really good. The cutoff, the split second of seeing Aizawa's eyes before Izuku's power doesn't activate. It's just a good way of building tension of Izuku potentially coming in last, as well as a good showcase of Aizawa's power. It's also kind of funny how often Yusei Run is used in this first season. Like, in the future, it's saved for only, like, the hypest moments, but here it's like, yeah, put it on him throwing a softball, fuck it.
No, that's not what I was trying to do!
It's very funny seeing powers in their first uses because you can see what's changed about them. While the levitation aspect of Aizawa's claw stayed, he absolutely cannot pull a maneuver like this in the future. In fact, it seems to be a mistake in the adaption, as in the manga you can see that he's pulling it with his hands, rather than this telekinesis pull he does here in the anime.
No matter what your intentions are, you would be nothing more than a liability in battle.
While he's kind of being painted as the villain here, he's right. If Izuku used his power to punch the normal robots in the exam, he would have gotten maybe 10 points max before he was immobile. If he wasn't stricken by fear, he would have absolutely failed. And in a real crisis situation, a glass cannon would not be a good idea to have, because it guarantees an extra person in the hospital regardless of how well the heroes do at rescuing people. So yes, Aizawa is spitting.
You have the same reckless passion as another overzealous hero I know.
Interesting how he's already able to see the parallels between him and All Might and be completely correct in that. Really shows how much of Izuku's ideals shine through during the entrance exam.
With your power, there's no way you can become a hero.
This may seem harsh, but keep in mind that to Aizawa, Izuku has had this power for 10 years. Every other person in the society with a quirk has had over a decade of experience at the point they come into UA. So to him, seeing Izuku break all of his limbs in the exam, he likely assumed that this power wasn't something that could be controlled, or that Izuku just didn't bother trying to control it. So even though he may seem very harsh from our perspective, as we know that he just got this power, to him he's simply stating the obvious. Izuku's ability to adapt to what Aizawa said to him is excellent, trying to prove that he isn't without improvement, while still having a strong deficit against him. Like Aizawa says later, it showed he had some promise to him despite the fact that it still hurt him. This is also a really good way to evolve his power right now, limiting the unfiltered power to only a small portion of his body rather than just turning it all on. It keeps the weight of how powerful the quirk is while also allowing Izuku to have more leeway to do things until he actually learns to control the output itself. The distance he throws is exactly 0.1 of a meter above Bakugo's earlier score. That must have hurt for Bakugo.
You propelled the ball, the last possible point of contact.
Yes, All Might, we know, we just saw. Probably should have saved this for the next episode, since the reason for the recap in the first place was because it was the beginning of the next chapter.
How did you go and get so cool?
And that's the episode. Definitely the least I've had to say about one so far, but that's just how these more low-key episodes go sometimes. Some pretty good character establishment for Iida and Aizawa here, as well as a good introduction to the school itself. The episode just doesn't quite hit the emotional highs that it maybe could have. I think if they played a little more into Izuku's doubt as the exam went on, it would have been nice. And while the exam provides a good introduction to some of the characters' powers, I feel like it spotlighting more of them would have been welcomed, especially those who don't have as many appearances in Season 1. At least we get to see all their cool costumes next time. Right? On to Season 1, Episode 6. Rage, you damn nerd.
A throw like that requires a lot of force.
In the recap, rather than getting Izuku's internal dialogue after the ball throw, we instead get Aizawa's perspective. An interesting switch up there.
Tell me how you did that or you're dead!
Might be dipping a little too close to those Deku was depressed and bullied super bad in Aldria headcanons that people have, but here Izuku genuinely looks surprised that Aizawa stepped in to stop Bakugo. Even in the context of just the show, we do see him being assaulted in front of a teacher, so I don't think it's too far of a reach to think Izuku's genuinely shocked that someone, especially a teacher, stepped in to stop Bakugo. This also is kind of the first time Bakugo is humbled by UA. While I don't really like the over-the-top nature of his bullying in the first episode, this does provide a big contrast to it. This is not a place where Bakugo is going to thrive through violence.
Class 1A's homeroom teacher, Shota Aizawa. He can erase the quirk of anyone he looks at, but the effect ends when he
This breaks the normal conventions of how people are introduced in the show. Normally it names the person, then names their quirk, and describes what it does. This, for some reason, I believe is the only time the quirk itself isn't named during a present mic intro.
Your quirk is amazing, Kacchan!
In the flashback here, they're clearly going into the forest to go bug hunting, as seen by this net and Izuku carrying what I think are those plastic bug carriers. Not only does this align with Bakugo's internal dialogue comparing Izuku to a bug he can crush, it also gives a little insight at the same visually. Izuku is following Bakugo, the clear leader, and is playing a purely supporting role by carrying the bug cages. They only have one net here, and while it's possible that Bakugo shared, I think it's safe to assume that didn't happen, considering, you know, his superiority complex. Anyways, looking too much into that aside, I think the silent rage this scene shows is really good. Izuku using a quirk here essentially completely shattered all perceptions of Izuku Bakugo had.
Alright, time to give you your results.
Oyama looking into the camera again. This becomes pretty frequent in season 1 especially, but this is such a quick one I could see people missing it. Also, the person looking over Izuku here is Oshako. We know this because of the armbands. I think it's a nice detail that she stuck with him after he broke his finger. She was the first one to ask if he was okay earlier also. Okay, let's look over this list. I'm gonna use the manga here just for visual clarity. So, I have a few notes. First of all, I said last episode I think Bakugo would be the best at these tests overall because of his quirk being best suited to them. I have changed my opinion on this, mostly because I made this spreadsheet categorizing how each student's quirk would help in each test. Keep in mind this is mostly headcanon and deliberately based off of their current skill level. The basic gist of this chart is that if their quirk is helpful in a test, it's green, which is worth 2 points. If it's a bit helpful, then it's yellow and is 1 point. And if the quirk gives no benefit in a test, then it's red and worth 0 points. Originally, I was surprised at Bakugo ranking 3rd officially, but in my list, he actually ranks lower at 4th. However, a big difference is the fact that the two ahead of him in the original are actually below him in my list. The only person I agree with exactly is Shoji at 6th place. Otherwise, I don't know. I'm not going to touch on all of them and my reasons, obviously. If you really want, then ask me in the comments. That would take way too long to do here, so I'll just go over my biggest disagreements. The biggest thing is that I genuinely do not believe Izuku would have gotten last place. Kirishima, Sero, Kaminari, and Toru all have quirks that just straight up either do not do anything significant for them in these tests, or are actively completely useless. What the hell can electricity or hardening do for anything here? Genuinely, how did Kirishima get 8th place in the original? It doesn't make any sense to me. Izuku got at least one great score, but all the 4 below him I think could get an okay score on maybe one of the tests. On the opposite end of the spectrum, Momo is down 7 spots. This is because while her quirk is extremely versatile, I don't think it would be that helpful on a lot of the physical stuff like the distance running, the standing long jump, etc. She'd do well at, I think, stuff like the grip strength because she could create something for it, but in the series we don't really see her make anything that really affects her mobility in any way. Shoto is also really down. In the original video I mentioned that this was assuming Shoto could ride on his ice, but as pointed out by this commenter, this is confirmed to be something he could do at this point due to the flashback in season 3 showing him competing in the exam given to the recommendation students. Doesn't change the ranking since I already factored it in, but thanks for pointing out the real evidence for it. He learns to go fast way later on with his fire, but here he isn't using fire, so he only has his ice available, which really doesn't lend that exceptionally to everything. He still has a decent amount of points, but not 2nd place worthy. Speaking of 2nd place, Ashido is actually super underrated in the original list. We see her having the ability to skate on her acid this early, which opens up a huge amount of options for her mobility-wise. Plus, because of her breakdancing hobby, she's one of the few I actually believe has an advantage on the sit-ups and toe touches. Granted, that isn't strictly quirk-related, but I feel like it's worth accounting for. Sue is also super low for how versatile her quirk is, and did you know frogs have great grip strength? It's true. Anyways, to cap the segment off, I think Tokiyami is the one who could take the most advantage of his quirk in these tests. We see him use Dark Shadow for mobility as early as the sports festival, and stuff like the sit-ups can be helped with Dark Shadow. It's super versatile, and I think he's worthy of the #1 spot. I could go much more in depth with this, so again, feel free to argue with me about it. If enough people are interested, maybe I'll even make a dedicated video about it.
And I was lying, no one's going home.
Really beneficial change for the manga here. Like, I'm baffled the manga is like this, but Aizawa in the manga reveals that no one is being suspended before he shows the list. So, Izuku doesn't have this moment of defeat there. It's more of a, oh boy, I'm starting at the bottom, rather than a, oh shit, I'm gonna get expelled. Really good call for the anime to switch the order of these things. He is so shocked he broke his glasses. Also, Toru lets out a sigh of relief in the background here.
That's it, we're done for the day.
Oyama hitting the papyrus, or the Germa, depending on your region.
It's cruel to let a kid keep dreaming of something that will never come true.
This sentiment Aizawa expresses here is actually one that All Might himself expressed back in episode 2 to Midoriya. They actually both have quite similar backgrounds that both draw this conclusion. Hell, I'd say if All Might didn't know Izuku had one, for all he'd share a fairly similar outlook to Aizawa here.
But, clearly, We are gonna have us a problem.
I wonder if there was like a planned beef between All Might and Aizawa that never came to fruition. Or if All Might just assumed wrong here, because they don't really have a problem between them going forward. Easy to assume that he was going to have a problem though if Izuku was almost on the chopping block on day 1.
You know what? I like Deku. It could make a great hero name. Plus, I think it sounds kinda cute.
Guys, I have a confession to make. I spread misinformation. This, kids, is why you don't blindly parrot things even if they're a very popular fun fact. In my original video, I stated that in the original Japanese, Ochako says Deku sounds like Deruku, which is something that is fairly frequently stated in the fandom, but it's just not true. In the original, she just says the Japanese equivalent of saying that Deku feels like do your best, specifically saying Gambare, which, dear viewer, is absolutely not Deruku. If I had to guess, this misconception likely came from the sub-translation saying that Deku reminds me of the Japanese word for do your best, which can mean Deruku, but Deruku wasn't ever said in the original Japanese version. That may have been the subtext in it, but Ochako never directly says Deku sounds like Deruku in the original Japanese. It's just implied that she said that in the sub for some reason. Very confusing, and I understand how this misconception came to be. Thank you to this commenter for the very detailed breakdown of this and correcting me on it. I don't tend to just parrot things, and I will be sure to triple check if I do in the future. I also said in the original video that I wondered how the dub would approach this when it's called back to in the final fight, since she never said do your best or Gambare, which is kind of why it's called back to in the first place, and the answer to how they handled it is they didn't. They just kind of played the flashback unchanged so it doesn't lead into the whole do your best thing at all. Unfortunate, but what you gonna do, I guess. Or do they? It's costume ranking time! Going in seat order. First up, Aoyama. I actually quite like this costume. It's a bit over the top, but it kind of fits with, you know, Aoyama. I like that his support belt is made to match with the costume, or I guess the costume is made to match the support belt. Only real downside is that the glasses aren't the best. Either switch up the design or colors and it would be pretty damn good. B. Next is Mina, and the 80s carpet aesthetic doesn't really work very well for her. I could definitely see the intent here, kind of mimicking a melty acid texture, but it ends up being kind of messy and the colors just don't complement her that well. The fur and boots are fine, but I could really do with a different bodysuit. Horikoshi has actually used a slightly different color palette for her a couple of times and it does wonders. Replacing the purple with the same yellow as her eyes and making the cyan a bit more vibrant really helps. Here's a rough mock-up of what it would look like on her final outfit. Still wouldn't be my absolute favorite this way, but it would still be a step up. F as is. Asui's is a really good one. I love that the goggles on her head look like frog eyes. The palette in general is just easy on the eyes, and I like the oversized gloves. The entire suit is also taking some cues from wetsuits that are used for diving, which is just perfect. Just overall a really strong design, not really much else to say. So, A. Iida's costume is just cool as hell. I love the armor aesthetic and the general look of the costume as a whole. It's super unique among the class and it really stands out even outside of it. Also, the fact that it's based on his brother's costume is really cool. I kind of wish the helmet was used more actually. But anyways, damn good costume. S. Ochako is next and we continue the string of good costumes. While I do prefer a costume in the later seasons, as it just kind of streamlines this one, this is still really good. I like the helmet, the color palette is great. It's just a good costume. The only thing I can nitpick is that I don't really like the look of her pelvis area. The line coming up it and the belt just kind of clash a little bit with the rest of the suit. But overall, A. Ojiro's costume is probably like the blandest. It's fine, inoffensive, doesn't do much to stand out. It's just kind of there. He's not like a bad character or anything, he's fine, but really he's like, oh man, Ojiro's my favorite character. Like, what does he even do throughout the series? I mean, at least his quirk is shown off before season 2, unlike Sato, but that's because it's a fucking oh, wait, I was supposed to be talking about the costume. I like the fur on his collar, I guess. D. Kaminari's hero costume is pretty okay. I think it gets a little better later, but as is, it's alright. It's not horrible, but for an electric hero, I'd say it could have pulled from that more. There's already a few more casual costumes in 1A alone, so having him stand out a bit more would have been nice. I'd say this is a solid C for now. Kiroshima's hero costume is really great. The colors and cloth around his waist, the weird gear things, it's all really recognizable. He definitely could be showing less skin, and I'd say that's my main critique, but his quirk is kind of hard to work around in that regard. But regardless, I'd say a high B. I don't like Koda's costume. I don't really know what they were going for. I mean, it's a mouth, and he can command animals, so it's something, but I'm just not a fan. It's just weird, and the color palette is so unappealing. I don't have much else to say. It's just an odd design. F. Sato's costume is okay, but boring. It's very basic, but like, gets the job done. It's good in motion, and it looks better when it gets that All Might shading when he's quirked up, but outside of that, which is most of the time, it's kind of forgettable. I like the pouches for carrying sugar at least, and the color palette doesn't make me want to tear my eyes out, so that's good. Otherwise, it's a pretty generic hero costume. C. Shoji's hero costume is a solid good. Nothing outstanding, and the rings on his body are a bit weird, but I like how his mask is just part of his hero suit. Overall, it does a good job of kind of emphasizing the arms by being a bit darker than them. It's not meant to be that attention grabbing, and the palette used for achieving that is pretty nice. Just a good one overall. B. Jiro's hero costume is probably not objectively a good one, but I like it anyway. I love the coat used, and the boots are a really cool support item. I'm also a sucker for fingerless gloves. I just think the costume as a whole really fits her character. I think the pink undershirt maybe would look better red to match her eye, whatever these things are, but overall I just think it's neat. A. Okay, I actually fucking love Sarah's hero costume. It's a tape dispenser that's so good. I also really think the palette works here, like genuinely for a side character. This is such a good design. Kind of out of nowhere, but I'm gonna have to give this an S. Tokoyami has a serviceable hero costume. I think on its own it's a little bland, it's just a cloak and a dark body full suit under, but I think it's kind of akin to Shoji's costume where it's simple so it doesn't distract from Dark Shadow. It's a little more extreme here though. There's really no design here, but it works well enough for what it's trying to do. See? Okay, for Shoto's hero costume, I can see what they were going for. His fire side being covered by his eyes to be a visual indicator that he doesn't use his fire side, but also it's just so ugly, man, especially the ice mask. I think it just ends up being silly. The pure white underneath is interesting. I think it works better for him than the blue they use later, but it does not save this one at all. D. Toru's costume. I mean, it works. I don't know what I'd change. I mean, it's a costume for someone who is invisible, and yeah, it works well for that. Don't have much to say. It's fine. See? Bakugo's hero costume is so good. I love how insanely over the top it is. It fits him so well. The giant grenades and the hair things, God, I know that costume is obviously kind of impractical, but I love it. He is a grenade. Not to mention the color palette is actually really good. The oranges and dark greens work really well with the black. But yeah, I like this costume a lot. I'm gonna put it in S. Look at this dork. I know his mom got him the costume, but oh my god, the design is just not it. The ears and the mask look more so silly than anything, and the bright green I feel like clashes with his dark hair more than anything. I'm really glad this is what he stuck with. Anyways, yeah, sorry Izuku, but F. This costume sucks. Honestly, mainly because of the diaper looking thing. I know it's meant to be a great ball, but holy shit, it does not get that across well. Nor does it look good. I think the cape and the mask are alright, and I like how it does that anime thing of the hair blending in with the clothes sometimes, but otherwise I just hate this bad, gross F. Yeah, this isn't great. I understand the reason for her needing skin showing because of her quirk, but as so many have pointed out before, there are so many other ways to do this more tastefully. Even just a zipper would be better than this. I actually vastly prefer her winter design just because it at least has a cloak to cover her up a bit more. I like the color palette of her costume and the detail of her carrying a notebook for the compounds of things, but outside of that, yeah, not great. D. And that concludes the costume ranking. Maybe someday we'll do a part 2 when they all get their newer versions. Back to the episode now.
Which included physical measurements and any desired costume designs.
Doesn't show up in the anime, but damn, Mineta kind of got fucked over with his design. Who did him that dirty? I mean, it's deserved, but like, wow.
I'm sorry, Izuku, and I promise I'll support you with everything I've got from now on.
I really like how Inko is portrayed in general. It would have been really easy to turn her into a one-dimensional character, or honestly not focus on her at all, as so many anime do. But she really feels like a realistic parent with some nuance. She's supportive of Izuku, but is still reasonably worried about him. She doesn't always do or say the right thing, but it's not out of malice. And she can recognize when she slips up, but she's also willing to stick to her convictions when she feels it matters most. I just really like Inko.
It's a gift from my mom, so of course it's what I'm gonna wear.
As much as I don't like the suit, I do think it's incredibly endearing that he wears the suit that his mom got him. Even when he moves on from this costume, he still incorporates the design elements from it as it evolves.
I love this school.
You're so obvious!
Honestly, I think it's subtle enough to not be obvious. In fact, the first time I watched, I doubt I placed the similarities together before All Might did. Izuku's fursuit gives more bunny than All Might, even if that wasn't the intention.
The villains have hidden a nuclear...
Shout out once again to the show for getting actual pixel artists. It makes a huge difference.
Wow, what are the chances? We're a team!
About a 0.5% chance, or 1 in 190 picks, assuming it's entirely random, which it is. And that is about a 2% chance on top of that, meaning this specific outcome has a 0.0001% chance of happening, or a 1 in 10,000. And that's not even taking into account the formation of Bakugo and Iida's team. Tough luck, Izuku. Izuku is instinctively scared of Bakugo here. Who expects this? Then when Izuku finds the will to look back, it pisses Bakugo off. This is another more subtle show of Bakugo's superiority and inferiority complexes. Superiority by not even reacting when Izuku is scared of him, and inferiority when he gets immediately angry when Izuku stands up to him, even with just a gesture as small as matching his gaze. This may even be fear. I keep talking about inferiority and superiority complexes together because despite seeming like they would contradict one another, they actually are very closely linked, a superiority complex often being the result of an inferiority complex, essentially boosting your ego to compensate. So when that compensation, i.e. putting others below you and putting your self-worth on them failing, begins to not work out, the superiority complex facade starts to crumble and the inferiority complex begins to become more obvious. So far, we've only seen some peeks at the inferiority aspect of it, but during this upcoming fight, and especially the aftermath of it, the other side of that coin begins to really show.
If things go too far, I'll step in.
Sure.
Do you really think Deku has a quirk?
Bakugo essentially being in denial of Izuku having a quirk is again a really big indication of how much his superiority complex hinges on Izuku being a, as he describes, a bug he can crush, or just a pebble in his path.
He can be a real pain, sure, but his strength and confidence and his ambition, not to mention his quirk.
It is really interesting how Izuku truly sees the best in everyone. While this could and probably is also a factor of his low as hell self-esteem, he's also willing to objectively look at someone who has personally wronged him for a decade and pick out the good in that person, or at least the things he thinks is admirable. This is what really sets him apart from others. This is the way he can see through people into their cores. He's willing to not let bias cloud his judgment of others, even when he has every right to. Really good characterization here.
I want to hurt you so bad they'll have to stop the fight! Just look!
This line always really confused me because it really sounds like he says wanna here instead of won't, which makes the just close not make any sense. It's probably a me thing, but I wanted to point it out anyway.
He's not that good!
This really goes back to a point I made in episode 1, where Izuku's analysis and smarts are what allows him to keep up with his classmates, even while his quirk is worse than theirs. It also ends up being a main factor in why he's eventually able to pull so far ahead of them as well. This is a great start to the payoff for the establishment of his analytical side that they set up in the first episode. I don't have too much to say here that I didn't already say about his name earlier, but I think the ability to take something negative and spin it to mean something positive is once again a really good character beat. And it's also probably what really sets Bakugo off here.
You're shaking in your boots, you're so scared. Because you want to fight me anyway. That's why I hate you!
Yeah, that about sums it up. I feel like I've exhausted all I can say right now about a superiority complex, but yes, Izuku continues to be a threat towards it, and Bakugo's not handling it well. The cracks are really beginning to show here, especially with that read Izuku had on Bakugo with the right hook. He's starting to learn that he isn't as untouchable as he had hoped.
That's the Iida way, and I won't tarnish my family's heroic name.
I don't normally have anything to say about these outros, but this drops the fact that Iida comes from a hero family. Interesting, because we don't normally learn that until episode 9. Also, anyone else miss the fact that they brought other characters in to do these in the early seasons? They never do that anymore. Just Izuku. Sad. And that's all for the episode. My god, I had significantly more to say about it than I thought I would. Granted, a lot of it was costume ranking, but wow. A lot of stuff setting up the groundwork for Bakugo's character here. It was really fun to dig into that. And there's plenty more where that comes from in Season 1, Episode 7, Deku vs. Kacchan.
Come on! Let's fight bad guys!
Opening on the flashback was generally a good call, though I think the direction kind of falters a bit here. The music is just not it, especially once we cut back to the present. Bringing back the not all men are created equal line in relation to Bakugo being given an extremely powerful quirk, rather than Deku being born quirkless, is also really smart, but I think re-recording the line in a more sinister tone and also, again, having better fitting music would make this moment really stick out. As is, it kind of just blends into the before credits recap.
So there's a 15-minute time.
This is a cool-ass timer. That is all. I just like this timer. Does this count as a clock? No. No, I said no digital ones.
What'll Kacchan do now? Knowing him, he'll be impatient and try another big punch!
We got him countering Bakugo in the last episode, but here we get a taste of his actual mindset, similar to episode 2. This is also good at cementing the fact that Izuku can keep up with people even when not using his quirk, by using his analysis and general situational awareness.
Plus, he spent years taking notes on different heroes.
I wonder if Izuku's hero notebook played into All Might's decision to give him One for All at all. It's certainly possible. Also, knowing he read the book before telling Izuku that he couldn't be a hero makes that scene all the more sad. I bet it was difficult for All Might to be honest to him back then, considering how obviously passionate Izuku was about heroes.
He's switching things up so I can't predict his moves.
Izuku deciding to immediately retreat when in unfamiliar territory, that being Bakugo being potentially worried and desperate, is incredibly good situational awareness from Izuku. This also factors into Izuku mostly just wanting to waste Bakugo's time. As he says later, Izuku doesn't think he could have won in a head-to-head, so using both his learned strategies to avoid Bakugo when he's on the attack, and running when he is able to, is just plain good battle sense. Hell, it's what's meant to be taught by the final exams at the end of the next season, and he did it in their first combat training. Once again, Izuku's mental game is already ahead of his peers.
You were tricking me for years by acting weak! Bet you've been laughing behind my back, huh?
Here we see a desperate attempt at Bakugo rationalizing what is happening. I couldn't imagine being in that situation for him. Once again, that ball throw really shattered Bakugo's entire perception of Izuku. And now that it's out of the bag, Bakugo seems the worst. This is his inferiority complex. He assumes Izuku was doing exactly what he himself was doing to him. He also immediately looks to challenge Izuku, as Bakugo winning against him would correct the seeming wrong. If he wins this, he'll still be above Izuku. Better than Izuku. So he desperately wants to win this, and as we see later on, when that doesn't happen, he can't handle that reality well at all.
But this level of pride is something else. It may end up being his demise.
It's really good that Bakugo has as strong convictions as he does, because having these complexes could easily lead to manipulation if left unchecked. That may be what All Might is thinking, but as we know later on, his desire for heroism is an even stronger conviction for Bakugo than being above others. We see this in both the final exams and when he's kidnapped by the League of Villains.
I'll just have to capture Kacchan down here, on my own. I can do it.
I would say it's bold to assume that he could win in a 1v1 against Bakugo, but he came millimeters away from doing that earlier, so I guess it's fair for Izuku to think this way, though obviously that doesn't pan out. Also, the anime doesn't adapt this frankly horrifying panel of Iida and Bakugo. Oh my goodness.
You gotta believe me! I take back everything I said.
It's pretty crazy how much Izuku's confidence has improved since getting into UA. I think that also actually being able to hold his ground against Bakugo, even briefly, was a big boost for him, considering Bakugo has essentially been terrorizing him for 10 years, all without a quirk as well. I kind of like that in the anime, the explosions started as little small pops, rather than the manga's more traditional Bakugo explosion. It's a good way to imply the growth and improvement of his power as he got older.
It's gonna grow into an amazing quirk.
Definitely. A flashy quirk for a future hero.
These poor people didn't know what monster they were creating. Teaches them to be actually nice to a student.
Deku doesn't have a quirk like no.
The return of the feet imagery! This is definitely one of the most blatant examples of quirklessness being tied to feet in the series, outside of that one manga panel I showed before. Once again, it's crazy how much this shows up.
Are you hurt?
The ever-iconic river scene. So, in these two flashbacks, we see both the birth of his superiority complex and his inferiority complex, both being triggered by frankly incredibly mundane events. You guys getting tired of me talking about these complexes yet? Anyways, what's interesting about this is a lot of the time in stories with villains, if you want to redeem someone who is bad, you give them a tragic backstory, or something that humanizes them. Hell, we see My Hero do it all the time with their villains. But for Bakugo, he doesn't have that luxury. He doesn't have that scapegoat of a sad childhood, bad parents, or anything of that sort, which makes the challenge of redeeming him much harder from a story writing perspective, even if he hasn't done anything as actually bad as the villains. This is why you see people downplaying the League's horrible actions a lot of the time. It's because they are tragic characters, and Bakugo is decidedly not. To me, that struggle the story has of making him likable despite that makes him all the more interesting. All of this development throughout the series is simply overcoming himself, his own mindset. Not a traumatic event, not a terrible situation, simply his own ego. That's what the purpose of this scene is. It's not to explain why he's like this, it's to show that he is just a kid with an ego.
I won't fail this trial and risk bringing shame down on the Iida family name.
I know in the preview of the last episode it already showed that he was part of a hero family, but this line could also be a small setup for him being part of one as well. Also, I don't really have any overanalysis of it, but evil Iida is an amazing bit.
I knew you would come here alone the instant that Bakugo ran off by himself and engaged with Midoriya.
Iida immediately trying to work around Bakugo going rogue is also really cool setup for his ability to stay calm in situations out of his control. Once again, just more good characterization and arguably some small setup for episode 9. I love this effect on the gauntlet. Does this ever come back? I don't think so, which is a shame really. Though him firing his gauntlets in general isn't used a whole lot in the series, maybe like half a dozen times. Pretty obvious, but you can literally see his superiority complex facade fade over his inferiority complex after Izuku says he's not scared of him. It's really good how much they emphasize these two aspects of him in this episode without completely beating you over the head with it. In the manga, it's even more subtle, not an expression of anger, but almost one of fear.
He'll be fine as long as he dodges!
The English dub here makes Bakugo seem even more murderous, with the sub in manga saying that if he doesn't hit him, he won't die, which kind of implies Bakugo isn't going for a direct hit, so it's kind of funny that in the dub he seems even more crazed. Not sure which one I prefer, maybe the sub because it ties more into a line All Might says later, but I still do like the line, "He'll be fine as long as he dodges." This is an amazing cut by Masashi Takai. The framing always really stood out to me, and I think it's partially because of the amazing manga panel it's adapting. Such a good use of negative space here.
The more nitro sweat that's stored in these gauntlets, the stronger the explosion is!
In the manga, these lines aren't actually said by Bakugo, but by the narrator. Also, there's a small change from the sub to the dub here, where rather than saying Izuku can't beat him with his power, he says he wants to beat Izuku while he uses his quirk. Small, but it definitely leads more to what I said earlier about Bakugo wanting to defeat Izuku to feel superior, and to do that he has to make sure Izuku uses his quirk. It's kind of like how in Season 2 Bakugo wins against Shoto in the sports festival, but is still pissed off because Shoto wasn't using his full power. This is that, but maybe even on a more personal level. Honestly, Iida grabbing the bomb is such a smart move. I don't think I would have thought of that. Though in a real scenario, you might not want to be moving around an arm bombed at speeds like that. Still, very good move from Iida's part. Again, showing his adaptability really well.
Despite his fierce posturing, he's not actually trying to kill Midoriya.
Cool of All Might to piece this together just by a few of his actions, though we absolutely should have stopped the fight after that grenade stunt and Bakugo not listening to him. To be honest, I think it's kind of insane that the support company that made their suits even allowed a 14-year-old to wield a power like that. That's an accident waiting to happen. Also in the manga, Bakugo's reaction to All Might saying he'll be penalized is this panel of him going, "Come on, man!" And I think it's kind of a shame that it was cut. I don't know why I like it as much as I do.
It's no good! I can't dodge this!
In the manga, Izuku actually says "damn" here, which for someone who unironically says "holy whoa," it kind of caught me off guard. Also, I love the stylized colors here. It's something I wish the show did more often.
He doesn't come off as a guy with a strategy, but he's actually quite intelligent.
Thank you, Shoto. Exactly what I was going to point out. I mentioned back in episode 1 something that the show does a lot, especially in the early setup for Bakugo's character, is that it takes a lot of opportunities to emphasize his intelligence. I didn't delve into it much then, but I think a reason why it's so important is once again subversion. A lot of people describe My Hero Academia as subverting a lot of shonen tropes, while still at its core being a very shonen story. A lot of people point to the lack of mentor death, the hopeful tone staying consistent even while it gets darker, and especially a lot of Bakugo's character as a whole. The most common thing people point to is the fact that Bakugo, despite being an antagonistic force, doesn't turn to evil at any point. This is true and a great part of Bakugo's character, but I think it goes even deeper than that, and his intelligence is part of that subversion. I said earlier a way to make an antagonist redeemable is to give them tragedy, and Bakugo already doesn't have that. Well, what's another way to redeem someone who is egotistical or brash? It's to knock them down a peg. That's why I say a lot of characters that serve a role like Bakugo's are characterized to be stupid, because if it isn't a tragic backstory, it's overconfidence. But Bakugo, once again, subverts this by being intelligent. His confidence is never the sole reason for the story to humble him, because he more often than not can back it up with his pure skill and intellect. Sure, he fails sometimes, but it's never the only factor in his growth. I'd argue that this fight in particular is one of the only times Bakugo loses based on just overconfidence, and we can see clearly that him just losing against someone he thought was weak isn't going to be a fast track for redemption. It only serves as a kickstarter for it. This may sound like a negative, but once again, having Bakugo not have any of the easy ways of redemption, and instead having to near exclusively take the path of personal growth through self-reflection, and more importantly, learning from the example Izuku sets, makes his arc an extremely unique and compelling one to me. Horikoshi deliberately has locked himself out of any easy redemption arc for Bakugo here in these first 10 chapters, and I think that's entirely on purpose.
Deku! Don't you ever forget what you are! You're a weakling!
Once again, a lot of Bakugo's dialogue here is him desperately trying to restore his own personal status quo. More than anything, he's convincing himself that Izuku's weak, not necessarily trying to convince Izuku of such.
He's running away!
Why is the stork running on all fours? Ooh, just a moment of appreciation for that sound design. The steam coming off of Bakugo's hand is so satisfying. What's cool about this moment in hindsight is you can kind of see where Izuku begins to lure Bakugo into the right spot to pull this moment off. Remember when he ran on all fours? That wasn't just to get away, it was to position Bakugo in the right spot underneath the pillar. I think it's kind of cool that we don't always get to see what Izuku's planning in the moment, so it can be a surprise to us when Izuku enacts a plan that he thought up on the spot. Speaking of which, it wasn't a bad one for being improvised, though as Momo points out next episode, it was kind of reckless. But as a way to purely win the exercise, I think it really shows Izuku's quick thinking off well. What this fight does as a whole is really good for Izuku and Bakugo's characters. There's a lot of setup here that can easily go unnoticed, but I think the big thing it establishes between them is that Izuku is more strategy smart and Bakugo is more combat smart. Bakugo's main folly right now is his lack of planning, but despite that, he still has the sheer skill and power to almost win by pure brute force. On the other hand, Izuku lasts almost this whole fight purely based on strategy and planning, enacting multiple long-term plans and waiting for the perfect moments to execute and use his pre-fight analysis of Bakugo's quirk and fighting style against him. They are almost opposites here in how they approach this battle, and I think that contrast is important to their dynamic, as going forward they begin to learn the best of each other's way of handling battles. It should also not be overlooked how well Ochako managed to adapt. Obviously she wasn't really the focus of this fight, but without her and her ability to react to Izuku's change in their plans, their team also wouldn't have won. Do you think the weapon became weightless here? That looks an awful lot like 5 fingers touching it to me.
You were playing me this entire time, you bastard!
This is a trait of Bakugo's that's often overlooked in regards to his inferiority complex. Whenever something goes wrong for him, he always assumes that it's because the other party is more smart than him. This happens a few times in this episode alone, but I think it's interesting to see how his inferiority complex manifests, like everyone is against him. His biggest fear seems to be people looking down on him, so whenever something doesn't go right for him, rather than thinking the more rational thing, like Izuku adapting to Bakugo, he assumes he's been played for a fool. I think this manifestation of that inferiority complex is actually really realistic, which is cool to me.
The hero team wins!
It's pointed out next episode, but I think it's really poetic that the winners of this battle are easily the ones that lost the battle. Like, if this was going purely off the state of the heroes and the villains, Bakugo and Iida would have unquestionably won. It really was just Izuku being able to take advantage of his strategy and Bakugo's lack of one that got them the victory. I would go more into how that affects Bakugo, but I'll have a lot of chances to do that next episode. Speaking of which, that's the episode. Obviously quite a standout of the first season. I think outside of the opening episodes and the All Might fight, this is really one of the defining moments of the season overall, and for good reason. This does a lot of legwork for Bakugo and Izuku as you'd expect, and beyond just the obvious, I think it does a really good job at setting up the smaller seeds in the plot for Bakugo's character growth later on. Bakugo has one of the longest arcs in the entire series, and this really is the beginning of it, and I think it's a fantastic start. And that's not even mentioning how great Iida is, the action and animation being good, and of course Izuku's own developments in this episode. This is probably the episode that does the most legwork for the future this season, outside of the first 2 episodes. And it's cool to see the start of all these threads that will be resolved literal hundreds of chapters later. That's all for this one. You heard enough about inferiority and superiority complexes yet? No? Well, I got you covered with Season 1, Episode 8, Bakugo's Start Line.
So this was your big plan?
This line in the recap is a different take of a line from a shot before this. They actually cut out any lines from the shot this was stolen from. I thought it might have just been a different take because it sounded off, but no, just a line change. Here they both are.
So this was your big plan? You were playing me this entire time, you bastard!
Just some weird quirks from the recap sometimes in this show. Most of this recap is just from last episode, with the exception of these 2 shots. Notably, Bakugo's expression is altered to not be quite as shell-shocked here, and especially here. Totally different vibes from the equivalent shot last episode.
If we didn't hold back at all, Deku would beat me with his quirk?
A lot of small dialogue changes from the manga in these chapters, but in the anime, Bakugo talks about if they really fought, he'd lose, which I'm not sure about. But in the manga, it says that he did really lose against Deku, which to me is a much more impactful statement, not a hypothetical, just a reality. Ochako still looks sick from quirk overuse here. Fun detail.
Midoriya's plan was also poorly thought out, considering the amount of damage that he received.
Momo actually points out a slightly different fault in the, you guessed it, manga. Instead of criticizing his injury, she actually mentions that Izuku's attack had the same problems of Bakugo's gauntlet attack, using destructive attacks indoors. Though I do appreciate more attention being drawn to the impracticality of Izuku's current glass cannon attacks.
That's the only real way to become a top hero.
So, it's been quite a bit since we've done one of these, but this is Momo's first real introduction. How is it? I think it's actually pretty good. What's interesting about her character in these first couple of seasons is that she's actually also a victim of being humbled by UA, though not yet. Here we learn that when given the chance to analyze something, she can do it well. She has a good sense for combat on a conceptual level. She's kind of like Izuku in this aspect. However, she's also kind of cocky and overconfident like Bakugo. She's presenting herself as this smart, cool, and calm person to her classmates and teacher, when that isn't entirely true. This kind of has a quality like Aizawa's introduction, where we're supposed to buy into this persona until we learn more about her. I'll go into it more next season with her arc being more of a focus, but it's an interesting thing to keep in mind this first season as well.
One of the 4 students admitted to the hero course.
Oyama looking into the camera again. While on the subject, I'd like to quickly mention its character page, the only one outside of Toru, with his eyes completely being hidden. Weird thing for him of all people to have, right? The guy always looking at the audience. His description is also much more vague than anyone else's. You don't know what this guy's deal is, Horikoshi. Not sure if I fully buy that one.
Admitted to the hero course based on recommendations.
Weirdly, in the manga, she is the, quote, #1 recommended first year, which implies there was, I guess, a hierarchy of the recommendation students. Interesting.
Just don't look, okay?
I like how creative they get with having Toru express her emotions. This little face bubble is cute. I also enjoy that the invisible girl is someone who's super bubbly and outgoing. It's a fun contrast. One final thing, you can actually tell with how the objects move that when she gets embarrassed, she's actually covering herself up here, despite not being able to see anything. Again, a good way to show her personality off despite not being able to see her. This small gesture, and also All Might declaring the start of the battle, are also both anime original.
And I think the other's on the same level somewhere. Both are barefoot.
Wait, hold on. Ochiro isn't barefoot. As someone who's looked at feet way too much already in the series, I should know. I shouldn't say that. Anyways, is this just a straight up error? No, yeah, I checked. The manga says that only Toru is barefoot, not Ojiro, but in a semi-long-winded way. Weird. Okay, I also checked the sub, and it says that they're barefoot, which could go either way. There could be a singular referring to just Toru, but in the way the sentence is structured, it does seem like it's more referring to both of them. Interesting mistake there. Probably just a compound of a game of translation telephone, changing the sentence slightly and creating a mistranslation through minor changes throughout. Initially, I was thinking it was a little weird to introduce Shoto with a temperature regulation move when more commonly he uses ice spikes early on. However, when thinking about it more, this is kind of a signature of his Season 1 self. I don't think we see him firing ice until Season 2. All of his attacks this season are exclusively this kind of temperature regulation, which is kind of interesting. Another weird detail about this attack is that in the manga, it's kind of ambiguous as to what's actually happening here, as the entire building just freezes. This could be a factor of Horikoshi not quite knowing how his power works yet, or the anime just wanting to add more of an awe factor to his ice spreading. Definitely prefer the anime's approach nonetheless. Fairly obvious since Bakugo literally points it out himself later in the episode, but this shot is him realizing that he may not be able to beat Todoroki in a fight in addition to Izuku. More of a superiority complex crumbling, you get the drill by now. And honestly, while Bakugo does win against Shoto in the sports festival, I could see a reality where Shoto wins even with only his ice if he were a bit more smart with his approach. If Shoto froze the area around Bakugo and brought the temperature down significantly like he does in this training, Bakugo's sweat glands, the things that let him actually make the explosions, wouldn't function nearly as well, making Todoroki kind of a counter to Bakugo's power. It's a shame we never see them fully duke it out against each other at their fullest. A shot of Toru's anime original. In general, a lot of this chapter is extended in the anime. The entire upcoming montage of all the students' matches is only these 4 panels in the manga, the completely original additions being Momo and Mineta and Sato and Koda, which means all of the students get at least a little spotlight. While it would have been cool to see the full matches, I'm glad we at least got a bit more to chew on than what the manga gave us.
It's nice to hear some encouraging words after our homeroom class.
Weirdly, these lines are kind of a tone change from the sub to the dub, if that makes sense. In the dub, Sue is happy that the class was more encouraging, calling Aizawa a buzzkill, but in the manga and sub, she's actually saying that All Might's class was anticlimactic and almost a letdown. Kind of a crazy change there, probably the biggest we've seen yet. Just completely different meanings. I'm honestly not sure why they decided to divert so heavily. Once again, just that early season jank of them going off script a bit, I guess. Also, the animation here works better with the dub version in my opinion, despite the tone change.
Only a select few people know the secret of One for All, and a very close friend of mine.
So, I have a bone to pick here. Is this silhouette Night Eye or Tsukauchi? Because a lot of people think that Tsukauchi knows about One for All. Hell, even the fandom wiki says so. But guys, I'm kind of torn on that. For starters, despite Tsukauchi's closeness to All Might, he never mentions knowing of the quirk, or even alluding to knowing Izuku's the next owner of it, despite meeting Izuku and All Might in private on at least 2 occasions. However, he also never questions why Izuku would know about All Might's shrunken form, which may imply that he does know. He even appears among another person who knows about One for All, Gran Torino, fairly frequently. Additionally, why is All Might being vague about Night Eye here to Recovery Girl when Recovery Girl clearly knows about Night Eye? This could be because she doesn't know Tsukauchi that well, but I think the biggest piece of evidence against this is actually the fact that he's not present for the scene where Night Eye and the other people who know of One for All encourage All Might to step down from hero work and pass it on. These are the 4 that are unquestionably knowledge about One for All, and unlike Gran Torino, whom All Might apparently forgot about in this scene showing the other 3, good save there Horikoshi, it's never mentioned that he had forgotten that Night Eye had known, and like, obviously considering he told Night Eye he was passing it on to Izuku. So we have a bit of a toss-up here. Night Eye unquestionably knows about One for All, so he could easily slot into that place, but Tsukauchi also has a suspiciously large amount of evidence potentially connecting him to knowing about the quirk. But I'm not sure if it's enough to be concrete. Unless I'm missing a key point in this, I think we should be assuming that this is Night Eye here.
The temptation of this power could corrupt our society.
Once again, small change from the dub here. Rather than talking about people wanting to gain One for All, he just mentions that society would fall without his protection. Honestly, I think the dub provides a better reason as to why he doesn't want to share the secret, less vague and actually answers Recovery Girl's question.
Young man.
We get an anime-only flashback sequence here, which really isn't necessary. I guess we are at the halfway point of the season, but I think it was more to pad out the runtime of this episode. As opposed to other episodes up to this point, outside of episode 1 and 2, which are special cases, each episode has adapted at least 1.5 chapters, most episodes covering 2 or more, but this episode only covers a single chapter, chapter 11. This causes some pacing issues, and they cover it decently well by having that anime-only student montage from earlier, but I think if you wanted to adapt just this chapter, they should have been extended a bit more to tighten up the pace of the rest of the episode.
Listen well, young man. This is your choice.
Okay, this flashback is fucking weird. For starters, this is not when that line is said. It's said in this scene. The other one being where he's saying the name of the power, which is why Izuku parrots the name after. This is the case in both the dub and the sub, by the way. Then additionally, this is not what he says in episode 4.
Welcome, young Midoriya.
He says Izuku instead.
Welcome, Izuku.
There's even more strange quirks to this flashback, but they're more just minor dialogue shifting. Not as jarring as the first example, but it's just so odd to me. They just didn't need to do this. Do they do this just to fuck with me specifically since 99% of people won't even notice the difference? Answer me, My Hero Academia! Answer me!
It's late afternoon.
Alright, My Hero Academia, your clock game has been pretty on point since that first episode, but this I have to take small issue with. It's not nearly as egregious as that first clock, but technically this is also impossible. The hour hand is at exactly 4 p.m., possibly even a bit past it, but the minute hand is at 55 minutes, which is impossible while on the hour. Because of how minor this discrepancy is, though, you could argue that it's just the angle or whatever. I'll just put it in the thin ice tier. Also, the small sequence of Deku waking up is anime original as well.
Hi, I'm Hanta Sarah.
The anime inserted Sero, Oyama, and Mineta into the scene interestingly, including the small gag of Mina blocking Oyama from speaking. A lot of manga changes today, huh? I've noticed a lot in these past 2 episodes that the anime really tries to give students more lines or screen time in general in comparison to the manga. Probably a good idea to get us more accustomed to the class early on.
Tokoyami!
Okay, this is getting ridiculous. This scene is also anime original. Jiro and Ojiro are also additions to the shot, and so is the Izuku line. Seriously, it's rare for My Hero Academia to have this much deviation from the manga. It's normally about as one-to-one as you can get. Again, I think this is a factor of padding out the runtime of this episode so they can end on the Bakugo conversation.
What kind of stuff you like?
Anything sweet.
Kaminari getting no game at all is a pretty funny running gag in these early seasons, but they also cut Ochaku liking Mochi from the dub. How could they? That's like one of the 3 personality traits fanfiction writers pull from her.
Uraraka? Where's Kacchan?
Okay, final change today. Instead of the smooth transition from this scene to the outside with Bakugo by Izuku pointing out the chair, in the manga it's implied that Bakugo was actually in the classroom when Izuku got back, and there's a small time skip till after school rather than him leaving after Bakugo. I prefer the anime's take on it. It flows easier and it's cool to see Izuku be more proactive when going after Bakugo.
I haven't figured out how to make it my own, but I'm trying.
I think there's some significance to the fact that Bakugo only starts to break from the stunned, quiet state he's been in all episode when Izuku says that he's trying, because if nothing else, isn't that what's making him mad in the first place? It's the idea of Izuku, the weak, quirkless person he's put down for years, trying, despite Bakugo's best efforts to make him give up. It's what sets him off in episode 1, Izuku applying for UA, and he seems to have similar triggers in other events, especially Izuku trying to improve himself. So him being set off here by exactly that, Izuku wanting to try his best, is because Izuku trying at all with Bakugo's perceived weakness of him throws a wrench into his superiority complex. If a weakling becomes stronger than you, what does that make you? Weaker than a weakling? That is the mindset that Bakugo has now.
And I'll finally beat you with my own power!
Bakugo going from angry to shocked here is also telling. If anything, Bakugo likely thinks that Izuku is looking down on him here, almost rubbing salt in his wound because of his loss against Izuku. He basically says that in a second. But then, this declaration implies something different, once again causing a shift in Bakugo. I think it confuses him, because from Bakugo's perspective, Izuku has already won, so why would Izuku need to prove himself again? And that reason is Izuku doesn't view his victory as a win against Bakugo. If Izuku was egotistical and only wanting to rub salt in Bakugo's wound here, why would he say that he wants to beat Bakugo with his own power? That's why it's confusing to him, and why it makes him break down. Bakugo doesn't understand Izuku, because if anyone else was in his position, having just completely proved your bully wrong after 10 years, most people would be ecstatic, even good people would be, but Izuku, more than anything else here, just wants to make it clear that he isn't a liar. Izuku is a truly selfless person who doesn't even hold much against Bakugo, even when he has the right to, whereas Bakugo, on the other hand, has been holding onto that grudge against Izuku for 10 years. Bakugo can literally not fathom this and will have to come to terms with that reality throughout the series.
Borrowed power? Don't talk to me like I'm an idiot.
Bakugo immediately enters denial here, which is pretty expected given both the absurdity of Izuku's claim and also his mindset right now. In addition, he believes he was made a fool of just because he lost, even though people were actually impressed by him for the most part, once again showing his inferiority complex. If he isn't winning, he's a fool, someone who's worthless, a Deku. It isn't even just losing against Deku, but I think any loss here would have been devastating to him. This is his first time being humbled. I said last episode that he isn't humbled often by losing in combat, but UA certainly has many other ways of achieving it.
Crap! I even agreed with what that girl said!
This is also showing that he isn't entirely in his own head. It shows his intelligence and ability to recognize when others are right about him. Though, I'd say if he wasn't blinded by his grudge against Deku, he could have come to that conclusion without Momo. But note that he agrees with a negative point someone says about him before accepting Izuku's praise of him as fact. Once again, some inferiority.
Damn it! Damn it! Damn it!
A small detail pointed out by this commenter is that when Bakugo is angry, he puts his hands in the same position he uses when he activates an explosion, rather than the more traditional fist. As the comment points out, that adds some really good realism to him, since he wouldn't ever resort to a closed hand punch over using his quirk.
I'm just getting started! Got that!
His declaration against Deku is just a good moment, along with this entire conversation. This all just reinforces specifically his inferiority complex, highlighting the fact that Bakugo doesn't see himself as being without flaw. Quite the opposite, despite what he'd like others to believe. This moment is also good for Izuku. Here he gets his first true grounded motivations for why he wants to improve his power. He wants to make it his own. It's a great setup and a great start line for both Bakugo beginning to come with terms with the idea that Izuku might not be against him, and also Izuku gaining that motivation. They now have a semi-unhealthy rivalry that will later bloom into a healthy one.
Still plenty you have to learn.
Let go of me, All Might.
I like this music cut. Also, Bakugo refusing the literal #1 hero's advice and help is both a showing of his superiority complex and thinking he doesn't need it, but also potentially his inferiority by thinking he is undeserving of it. But here he does put up his facade again, likely as a coping mechanism.
Guess he's already over it.
Sure.
The fated battle between rivals.
I lied, there's another change. The scenes with these three watching their conversation is not in the manga either, though this may be my favorite change of the episode. I just like Ochako's obsession with their rivalry.
What were you saying to Bakugo before I arrived so heroically?
Actually, I kind of forgot.
Good save, Izuku, good save.
Learned firsthand how terrifying they could actually be.
This is our first after credit scene. Definitely not super common in MHA, but it's cool when it does. In addition to the obvious, which I'll mention in a second, this also sets up the next episode's news anchor opening as well by showing that All Might has already been publicly announced as a teacher. Just some cool through line between episodes and chapters.
The mighty symbol of peace.
I like how Nomu's just chilling here. I know it's to tease it, but like, shouldn't it be in a tank or something? It's not like it could be engaged in this conversation considering its lack of, you know, thoughts and feelings.
Is finally killed by the villains.
In general, this serves as a good tension riser. We are officially halfway through the first season and in school, and while there's been some stakes for Izuku personally, it's good to set up some real-world ones outside of the class. Shigaraki is Shigaraki here, not an outstanding introduction or anything, but it gives some intrigue just from his design. They're saving his real setup for much later. Also, the fact that the scene is missable is kind of cool. It's like a little secret, just like the League itself right now. But with that, that's the episode. Kind of a little bit of a disjointed one, huh? I think in my memory, the middle chunk of this episode is like a blur to me. I generally think My Hero Academia is well paced, but this episode really struggles with maintaining that, just due to the task of only adapting one chapter. If you're to extend any one chapter though, I'd argue that this one is the best option of the season, though I think they went about extending it all the wrong way. Still not a bad episode by any means, but it's carried hard by the great talk with Bakugo and just the very solid jokes throughout it. That's all for this one though. Let's vote for a class rep far too early in Season 1, Episode 9. Yeah, just do your best, Iida. Very rare instance of the intro being right after the start of the episode, rather than a recap or a cold open. Very little examples of this happening throughout the series, and the first but shockingly not last one of the season, as this happens next episode also. Weird for the only 2 times this season to be back to back.
But he's also not afraid to show his students a more humorous side. It's truly a unique opportunity.
I know that it's like the joke, but I don't really get why they'd not like Iida's answer here. It seems good. Maybe I'm biased as an overanalyzer myself.
I know, right? We've been here for 2 days and I don't have a single comment on the record yet.
I initially thought this meant that it had been 2 days since battle training, but considering Aizawa's later comment about the students' battle training being yesterday, it means All Might being a teacher was actually publicly announced the day the semester of UA began. I always kind of assumed they waited a bit to announce it since we only now see the reporters, but this means that there isn't really any time skip between the days we have seen. What a first week of high school, huh? Also, this means the last episode Shigaraki scene likely took place a bit further back chronologically than when it's shown.
Bakugo, you're talented, so don't sulk like a child about your loss, okay?
I really like this relatively small change they made to the anime here. In the manga, Aizawa is far harsher to Bakugo while basically saying the same thing, but I think the anime is much more in line with Aizawa's character going forward in general. I think it's that combo of sweetness and brashness that really makes it true to his characterization.
And don't give me the excuse that you don't have control over your quirk.
I already mentioned it in episode 5, so I won't go into it too much here, but once again, this harshness towards Izuku here makes sense when you consider that from Aizawa's perspective, Izuku has had 10 years to learn to control it. I wonder if Aoyama wanted to become class rep because he knew it would give him more insider information for All for One. Maybe not, but it's an interesting thought. Also, wow, it's the Mina blocking Aoyama gag again. I did not remember that being a recurring one for some reason.
How did I get 3 votes?
I still think it's absolutely wild to pick a class rep on day 3 of school. Imagine if they genuinely got stuck with Izuku as the rep just because he had hype moments and aura in one combat training. I will say though, this is creating an interesting contrast for Izuku. At his middle school, he was a literal laughingstock, so suddenly being thrust into being well liked and respected by his other classmates is a huge difference for him, and this will get emphasized even more later in the episode.
Maybe I'll just keep my vote to myself.
So, we know that Izuku got his 2 extra votes from Ochako and Iida, and Momo got her 1 extra from Shoto. So, does that mean everyone else voted for themselves? I guess so. I was gonna argue against Koda being characterized to do that, but he's literally in the manga panel raising his hand, so the only other people I could maybe nitpick wanting to be a leader is maybe Shoji and Tokuyami, but even then, it's not entirely out of character. Just kind of wild to me that everyone but Ochako and Shoto wanted to be class rep, but I guess that's the kind of people a hero course attracts, huh?
Your courage and quick thinking under stress will help make you a worthy leader.
Honestly, yeah, I could see it. I think as opposed to a lot of other students in 1A, Izuku's faults at being class rep don't come from his lack of skill or ability like some others, but from lack of social confidence, which is still important in being a leader. I think Izuku would be a great class rep post, like, season 3. Ochako has a grain of rice on her face for most of the scene, which is a really cute detail, but loses it in this one shot in the anime for some reason.
The Iidas have been pro-heroes for generations. It runs in our blood.
It's a shame we only ever see his older brother in action, not the rest of his family. It would have been cool to have a full family team up. Hell, if not here, then in Vigilantes or something. Though I guess him talking about generations implies that it's more of a mantle that's passed down over time, but still, give me Grandma Iida moving lightning fast or something, I'd eat that up.
Ingenium is an unmatched commander who honors the hero code.
I honestly think a big part of why they set up Ingenium now, and in this way specifically, is to bring doubt into your perception of Stain's ideals later on. If this hero, who is an unmatched commander who honors the hero code, somehow a leech on hero society, then who is worthy of the mantle? I'll talk about this more when we dive more into Stain himself, but I think the setup is really good to do this early for both emotional and story payoff later.
You figured out what the judges were looking for in the practical exam.
I like that him miscrediting Izuku for figuring out the practical exam comes back in this way. It's a small but cool through line. I also like that Izuku keeps trying to clear up the fact that he didn't actually know about it. Very Izuku of him. It can be taken for granted easily, so I just want to point out how I love that they made him spin because the force of his boost is only coming from his legs. Such a fun detail.
Listen up! Everything is okay! It's just the media outside!
So, obviously this is just a good moment of characterization, both proving his ability to be a commanding presence, but also showing that he's capable of taking action under a crisis just like Izuku was. It shows his situational awareness, quick thinking skills, and clear communication. His communication skills may not be completely up to par with his classmates on a social level, but his clear and concise way of delivering instructions and speaking clearly do make for a good leader.
Someone else must have been behind this. Some villain actually managed to infiltrate our school.
I mean, in this society you could still have a strong quirk while having a normal job, right? It's not that outlandish to think that someone has a quirk to destroy a semi-reinforced wall. It's not like it's armed or anything.
But was this purely a show of power? Or a declaration of war?
So, why did Shigaraki do this? It's fairly easy to surmise much later that Shigaraki did this mostly as a diversion. He likely never even entered campus himself. Letting all the press in and creating chaos was probably how Aoyama was able to get the schedule so that Shigaraki knew what day they'd be at the USJ. This may seem like a stretch, but why would Shigaraki have done this otherwise? If anything, it would have been better to keep on the down low and tell the USJ, if he could have, to have more of a surprise factor. This scene is also a small setup for his quirk, showing the decayed door and being able to link it to him standing outside before, creates an easy way to make his first real encounter with the heroes have tension since we've seen one of his feats.
I'm here to keep you safe, even on my morning commute.
This small panel of Mount Lady and Kamui Woods was cut, which is a shame, it's cute.
Fighting that sludge villain, even though I was exhausted, shortened the time I can spend as the symbol of peace.
I wonder if this implies that if All Might never pushed himself as hard for the sludge villain, the USJ, Island, and the fight against All for One, that he could have continued being a hero indefinitely. Maybe not, but it's interesting to think about. Though with how much of the series is about going beyond, I doubt there's any universe where All Might didn't eventually lose it.
If word got out that One for All could be passed on, villains across the globe would come for you, trying to take it.
Interestingly, the point they added in the anime that All Might told Recover Girl last episode was pulled from here. I still think that this is a good reason to not want the secret to be widely known. I also do like that Izuku ended up telling All Might that he had told Bakugo. It's just within his character to do so.
But keep in mind that you haven't gotten used to them yet, and they might limit your abilities.
Kind of unsurprising, but this animation of their costumes coming out of the wall is the same one from episode 6. Also, do we see their costumes pop out of here beyond just these 2 episodes? I don't think we do.
Iida's kicking it into high gear as our class rep, huh?
High gear because engine.
Kacchan's the one in class who's getting teased.
Like I said earlier, it must be a huge contrast for Izuku to come to terms with, as well as Bakugo. Imagine going from the top of your class's hierarchy to being someone that everyone already dislikes on day 3. We don't see too much of its effects on Bakugo, but Izuku definitely has a lot of social anxiety to get over before he can interact with his peers on the same level. He's getting there, though. I just love this bus scene as a sort of tone setter for the class, where everyone stands with each other, the general personality of a lot of the students. It's great. If anything, I would have liked more scenes like this one early on.
UA is so confusing!
In the background of these scenes, you can hear an argument. It's kind of hard to tell what they're saying, so here. I unfortunately can't play the scene in full because of copyright, but I like the banter here. It's fun.
Hello, everyone. I've been waiting for you.
13's introduction and the USJ's introduction are switched around in the anime.
Apparently, he did too much hero work on the way to school this morning and used up all his power.
The implication here that the teachers use the number 3 as a way to signal to other teachers that All Might isn't coming is a super cool detail, being based upon his 3-hour limit of being a hero every day.
But my quirk could also very easily be used to kill.
This is kind of the beginning of a long plot point about heroic quirks and villainous quirks, and how the line between them is basically only how you use them, despite what society believes. This is obviously explored with Shinzo specifically, but it can be applied elsewhere as well. I won't go into it too much yet, but it's cool to once again plant these small plot seeds early so that these ideas don't come out of nowhere later when they're relevant.
Please don't forget that if you lose focus or make the wrong move, your powers can be deadly.
This is also something that's explored briefly with Gentle Criminal most notably, as well as even Shoto and Inasa in the licensing exams.
And because of All Might's combat training, you likely experienced how dangerous your powers can be when used against other people.
I feel like maybe the spiel about how dangerous quirks are should have come before the combat training. Hell, I think rescue training in general should have, actually eased the students who have barely used their quirks to their fullest into fighting. At least they had the quirk assessment before combat, but that isn't even part of UA's curriculum. I feel like throwing barely trained 15-year-olds at each other in combat is an accident waiting to happen, even considering Recovery Girl's existence. Shigaraki's design is so damn cool. I mean, look at this manga panel, dude. This ambush is honestly really cool. I think it happens early enough in the series that it could come as unexpected to even the viewers. Like, really, the first time you ever watched this, did you expect a second attack in the same episode? I doubt it. It's cool, and it really puts you in the shoes of the students to an extent. Having your regular school life just be ripped out from under you. Though, that being said, I do wish we got more time to know the class before this episode. This season and the manga really go quickly to get to the villains, likely due to wanting to grab the viewer's attention and all that, but I think more time in the school before this to flesh out the class would have made this have more stakes. We barely know any of the students at this point. I doubt most people would even know the names of them, let alone their goals or aspirations. It just makes there be less tension. Anyways, with that mini rant over, that's the episode. I have mixed feelings on this one. So much happens, and I think the pacing is much better than last episode, but it feels like almost too much crammed in at once. Though I think that's more the manga's fault due to its pace. This episode definitely has a good flow though, and I generally like the developments, especially for the class itself. And it has good setup for stuff like Ingenium, or even much more distantly the UA Trader. But that's it for this one. I hope Izuku doesn't get paired with anyone obnoxious in Season 1, Episode 10, Encounter with the Unknown. Before even getting into the anime, I have a detail to point out on this cover page. Aside from the weirdly large head of Kōhei here, Aoyama is once again looking away from the camera. This is a very early indicator of him having something to hide in regards to the USJ.
So you scumbags used the press as a cover and sneaked onto campus.
It's cool of Eraser to immediately put 2 and 2 together there, even if he's slightly off in regards to how they got the schedule. I'd also just like to point out how I love how Kurogiri is portrayed here as just a huge wall of mist. We don't really see him use his powers in exactly this way again, most of the time just being individual portals and such. This could also be a way he's currently disguising his body, which he doesn't need to do in the future since they find out about it in this attack.
Kaminari, try using your quirk to contact the school. Yes.
So, we know that Kaminari uses electricity and all that, but his quirk alone isn't shown to interact with electronics much outside of the very basics like batteries and whatnot. So, Aizawa saying to use his quirk to contact people is a bit strange. If anything, this is maybe a support item that can be charged by his quirk, but it's hard to say. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we get any elaboration on this device, or even much, if any, use of it at all throughout the rest of the series. Once again, just could be a weird oddity of some of the early uses of quirks in the series, where it doesn't quite line up to their later applications.
There's too many of them.
This is the second time this animation of the villains walking is shown. Modern MHA would never do that. It would do the much better thing of putting an overlay on it and playing the flashback sound instead.
You're fighting fighting style's not suited for this. Your power works best in stealth and one-on-one fights.
This mindset from Izuku could potentially come from the fact that he believed he couldn't be a hero while he was quirkless. Since Aizawa is essentially quirkless in actual combat, Izuku would assume that he shouldn't fight. Just a cool subversion of Izuku's expectations, and shows that while he's great at analyzing, he isn't necessarily always correct in his judgment.
Idiots! That's Eraserhead, a pro!
Sadako, what are you doing here?
Dangerous if you can reach me. Good thing.
I've taken measures to make sure that never happens.
You know, Shigaraki has a point. Aizawa is pretty cool. This is the first time we really see him go all out, and it's super neat, especially with what we know about him in hindsight. Here you could maybe assume that the scarf is part of his quirk. Hell, if you're watching the anime, that's basically the implication. But knowing what we know in the future, we know he's able to do all of this just through pure training and dedication with his support item. This functions as a really good contrast to All Might. Hell, a lot of Eraserhead is a contrast to him. All Might is a showboat, someone who fights with almost purely his strength. He wins fights by punching his way out. He's popular, charismatic, larger than life. Whereas Aizawa has a quirk that's more practical, a tool to him, not an instant win card. He's someone who's secretive, hates attention, and is extremely far from someone you'd perceive to be a hero. Yet despite that, he's able to accomplish great things just through strategy and using his quirk in a smart way. And Izuku is almost the middle ground between these two.
Damn. I blinked and the guy who seems like the most trouble got away.
You can actually see Kurogiri notice Aizawa's tell of his hair falling down in an earlier scene. This is likely when he teleported away. This actually happens at a slightly different point in the manga, so it's cool for that honestly pretty easy to miss detail being adapted here. Fucking ow! That is a nasty entry into the water from that height. I'm surprised he's just completely okay after that. Also, they cut the kind of unnecessary detail that he's screaming the fact that it's a flood zone.
He must have a warping quirk. They came here to kill All Might. I guess it's a good thing he's not in class right now.
Okay. I'm gonna take just a second to discuss the weird lack of panic here. I think this episode as a whole is a bit off from a direction standpoint, and I think that comes down to the fact that the students aren't really showing that much fear. The manga portrays a great sense of panic through pages being filled with lots of small panels, the students' facial expressions and the dialogue itself being very sharp, but the anime kind of has to slow down a bit to match the pace of the manga, and that causes there to not be that much momentum. It feels like it takes a while for the students to even start leaving, and of the responses from the students that are adapted into the anime, they are changed to be a lot calmer, especially Kaminari's and Momo's. I can understand Shoto, Kirishima, and Bakugo not being as frightened, but even Izuku himself is portrayed to be a lot more calm here. I think the pacing is also a problem because in the manga it feels like characters are constantly being caught off guard. Kurogiri comes out of nowhere, the shark monster comes out of nowhere, but in the anime there are these small lulls between the panels for exposition or just padding out the timing a bit, which to me lowers the tension. This may seem like a small point, but it really throws off this episode for me.
Teachers were busy trying to get the media off school grounds. That means they've been waiting for the perfect time to attack.
Here's the first indicator that at least some time has passed since they've been in school, which makes sense. Once again, though, I wish that time was either shown a bit more, or it was more obvious that some time has passed. This is the only real thing that tells us it doesn't happen even the same day as the attack on the school. I think this also could have been helped if they ended before the bus last episode. That way the time between could be helped metatextually, as there's a literal gap between the episodes. Also, it would tighten the pace of the Bakugo episode in this episode, which would alleviate my biggest problem with them overall.
A way to kill him. And didn't you hear what that smoke guy said? Maybe we should worry more about not getting tortured to death.
This is our introduction to Asui. This bluntness is honestly the best tone setter so far, though Mineta is not helping in keeping that tone consistent. I think Asui serves as a pretty good blunt straight man in this episode, and I honestly just wish she was more utilized throughout the series. She kind of could function similarly to, say, Iida comedically while still being a bit more self-aware. She's pretty funny in these couple of episodes when given the chance to be. Unfortunately, this is also our introduction to Mineta. And I'll try and keep this brief, but he is probably the most consistently bad part of the series. He really feels like a byproduct of shonen tropes that started to die out right after My Hero Academia began. Disliking Mineta is not exactly a brave take, but if I didn't mention it at least once in length, I feel like I would be ignoring a genuine problem the series has, and that's not what I'm setting out to do here. So, yes, Mineta has next to no redeeming qualities. He's a whiny brat, he objectifies women, and he's a bumbling coward. That being said, I don't plan to beat an already very dead horse too much here. Mineta sucks, we all know he sucks, so I won't be spending too much time in the future digging into him unless it's an exceptionally bad moment. I may blow him up a few more times though.
Because he's the one and only symbol of peace and justice? Actually, it doesn't matter.
This is once again a weird tone change from the manga. In the manga, Izuku's portrayed more as panicking and not understanding why they would want to kill someone he personally idolizes so much, who he's gotten to know as such a good guy to him. He's scared of his mentor dying. But in the anime, it's more him rallying himself to face the villains. He does eventually get to that point in the manga, but I think it has a much stronger characterization for Izuku, and once again, shows the peril that these teenagers are going through. This should be a moment of panic for most of them. They should be scared. I just kind of don't like this change. The scenes with the fire zone and the squall zone? What the hell is a squall? Oh, okay. These couple of scenes with the fire zone and the squall zone are not in the manga.
I'm the principal!
Your fur looks especially well-groomed and glossy today, sir.
I love this little shuffle All Might does here. Also, I like the principal's introduction. It doesn't make much sense that he's saying that he's the principal to All Might here, but he's so weird throughout the series that it kind of just works for me. This kind of just sets that up about him. I also just love how absurdly passive-aggressive he is to All Might here. This scene is just great in general. Such good characterization for the both of them.
Got them? Anything? Where is everyone?
Sorry to keep bringing this up, but just compare the intensity of this scene in the manga and the anime. Just completely tensionless in the anime in comparison. Generally, I think the anime elevates the manga more often than not, but this is an early instance of the adaption fumbling a bit.
Go emergency exit. There are lots of alarms outside.
Weird through line for the nickname that's actually not in the manga. Sato says to go to the emergency exit rather than calling Iida emergency exit. I think it's a shame how long Iida hesitates here for. I think it would have been a good character beat and more of a payoff for last episode if he not only acted faster on the idea, but maybe even came up with it himself. That isn't to say this isn't in character for him or even necessarily a bad moment, but I think it's just a bit of a missed opportunity to strengthen his character. As is, it's more just moving the plot forward.
Yeah, okay, right. It means the villains probably have no idea what our quirks are.
It's kind of interesting that when Izuku begins to strategize, it kind of overwrites his fear of some situations. This is more obvious in the manga, but it feels like when he's coming up with a plan, he's the most calm. Likely because that's what he's most familiar with. Hell, right now, what he's doing isn't much different from the kind of analysis he did in episode 1. The only difference is now, rather than hypotheticals and looking at it from an outsider perspective, he has to act on his findings himself.
We just got out of junior high a little while ago. I didn't think I'd be facing death a few days after starting you out.
Honestly, as much as I hate to say it, I wish that everyone else was acting a little bit more like Mineta here. Not in the annoying, pervert, screaming sense, but acting at least panicked a bit more. I'm really trying to not harp on this point too much, but once again, there's kind of a lack of tension right now. That being said, Mineta is unfortunately going too far in the other direction and making his panic comedic, which is just not it. It's not funny. Also, regrettably, there's a manga change here where in the anime he just says,
I can't believe I'm gonna die without ever getting to touch Yaoyorozu's build!
and in the manga he says, Yaoyorozu's boob Arozu's. I just...
Even though he's as scared as I am, even though he's shaking, he's still going through with this.
See, this would hit a lot harder if, you know, he was actually acting scared at all. I don't have too much to say here about this. I do like the strategy and how they end up defeating them. As always, Izuku's plan is good. I just think it's missing something. As a set piece, it's just not super interesting. They just sit in the boat for a while, it's sliced in half, and then Izuku wins with a flick of his finger. Again, good plan, just wish the pacing and the impact of his first battle against actual villains was more significant. It's lacking some of that emotional aspect of his other big smashes up to this point. Even smaller ones like the quirk assessment test. It just needs a bit more of that emotional core. But with that, that's the episode. If you couldn't tell, and I'm sure you could, this one isn't my favorite. I hate to complain, and I tend to be pretty positive with the show, but I did promise to talk about my dislikes, and this episode just kind of drops the ball in the tension that you should be feeling in a situation like this. It has all of the negatives of that comedic Bakugo scene from episode 1, but stretched out into an entire episode, and on top of that, it has a severe case of the Minetas. Froppy is good in this episode, but I think she was a bad choice to convey the severity of the situation. Her dryness plays decently off of Izuku and Mineta, but I think pairing Izuku with someone who's more prone to being scared and isn't Mineta would have benefited the stakes more. But at least we'll up the stakes when Eraserhead almost becomes Eraserdead in Season 1, Episode 11, Game Over.
I had a good poop this morning, which makes my balls stickier. They're not going anywhere.
Sorry to start off on kind of a weird note, but I wonder if this applies to other quirks also. Like, there's weirdly a decent amount of evidence suggesting that quirks are tied to glutical muscles, since we hear All Might tell Izuku to...
So clench your butt cheeks, kid. And yell this from the depths of your heart!
I know it may sound silly, but the glutes are a pretty important muscle when it comes to stabilization and such. Clenching them even kind of sends a sensation up your spine. The glutes are also what our unevolved tailbone is attached to, so it would be kind of cool if quirks manifested partially based on an evolutionary defect regarding our unevolved tails. Admittedly, this line of reasoning only really applies to quirks that are activated consciously, like One for All, hardening, electricity, etc. But Mineta's line implies that even mutation quirks may be affected in some way by the glutes. I don't know if I fully believe this myself in all honesty, but it's an interesting thing to think about at least.
You're creeping me out. Stop it, please.
I just really like this line for Sue's characterization. I think she can come off as kind of blunt and rude on the surface, but I truly think that she just speaks her mind, which is a super cool personality trait for a character, and I think it really fits her. She's really strong in this episode from a character perspective to me, even as just kind of a bystander to the attack. It's easy to see why she was a favorite in the early days of MHA.
It made us think our powers could actually work against the enemy. We'd soon learn how wrong we were.
Yeah, I'd say that's accurate. All them trying to help really did was almost getting Sue killed, and maybe buying All Might an extra second of time. Izuku kind of fumbles the bag here by suggesting this, honestly, definitely riding that high of winning, and I think it was important to humble him again a bit, to show how dangerous real villains are. Even though he seems conscious of his attack being a lot of luck, I don't think he internalizes it. It's cool to see once again that Izuku, despite being very smart, is still a 15-year-old at the end of the day. He isn't going to always make the right call.
Your cells will slowly die as your body succumbs to frostbite and hypothermia.
Awfully cold of you, Todoroki. Okay. But this is a pretty interesting look at his character. I don't think it tells us too much new about him, but it does show him staying cool under a lot of pressure, unfortunately likely a byproduct of endeavor. Like I said last episode, I think he's one of the few students that actually makes sense to be chill in a scenario like this, just due to his background. It also helps that his quirk is genuinely strong enough to face off against villains as it is right now.
These suits are terrifying! My whole life just flashed before my eyes! I think I saw the Grim Reaper! What's going on?
You know, I think Kaminari might have a point here. I mean, can you argue that? That's the damn Grim Reaper in the flesh. Or, I guess, bones.
Pull out a weapon for me, too!
You're the one with electrical powers. Just zap them so we can...
Okay, so last episode I complained a lot about tone. So, why do I actually like the scene, which is still on the lighter side? Well, there's a few aspects here. For starters, the characterization here is much more on point. Kaminari panicking while Jiro plays the straight man genuinely feels in line with how they are. In addition, they are still in real danger. But I think the big thing is that they absolutely get humbled in the next episode, and the tone changes accordingly. This is also at a point in the episodes where the heroes are meant to be on the quote-unquote winning side, since Izuku was able to take down those he was up against on the boat. Right now, they are overconfident, and the tone of the scene reflects that without dumbing down the stakes. This also functions as a good introduction to Jiro and Kaminari and how they play off of each other. It tells you everything you need to know about them very concisely. Jiro is cool under pressure, a bit cocky. Kaminari is more prone to panicking and being scared, but he's still able to think rationally despite the situation. I think it's a great showcase of their most important character traits, and the upbeat tone right now makes it fun to watch them squabble a bit.
Whoa! Hey, this is working! I'm super strong!
It's kind of a fun detail that he likely hasn't actually shocked another person before, at least in close range. Another reminder that this is their first real encounter with villains. I also just like how he reacts to this information, immediately becoming more confident. Again, showing an aspect of his character through that, which is good for establishing him as this kind of not all there in the head, but still at least well-meaning person.
It takes me a little longer to create an object this big.
Don't love the fan service here, but the plan was really cool. But also, how exactly did it completely rip the sides of her shirt like that? From what we see, sure, her back would have been ripped open, but we even seen the scene before that her front looks fine. Ugh, whatever.
We'll get out of here the second it seems dangerous.
In the manga, it actually isn't established that Izuku, Sue, and Mineta were watching this fight. Also, there's a bit of added fighting with Eraser and some fodder before Shigaraki and him fought. The fighting specifically was a cool addition, though I'm not 100% sure of adding Izuku and the others there this early. It doesn't necessarily take anything away, but the lack of knowing if Eraser has anyone backing him up in the manga was kind of cool. As is, they're kind of just there for reaction shots to pad out the fight a bit.
First it was 23 seconds.
Final boss.
Then it was 24 seconds.
Here we see a small look at Shigaraki's intelligence, which is kind of interesting since it's not something that's often brought up in relation to his character, but it's one of the very first things we see him established by. Why is that? I'll circle back around to that in just a second. I'd also just like to say how interesting it is to see how weak his quirk is here. It ties into something that I will talk about much later on in the show, but his quirk is allowed to evolve alongside the hero's quirks, which I think makes for a very cool in-universe way for the fights to become more deadly and impactful as the series and the stakes ramp up, but it also makes him and the other villains much more active characters, since they also have to grow just as much, if not more, than the heroes do to accomplish their goals. I just want to take a second to appreciate the excellent fight choreography and animation for Eraser in these few scenes, this one specifically belonging to Yoichi Nakazawa, who isn't a frequenter of MHA. A cool thing about Season 1 is we don't really see a lot of the mainstay animators of the series like, say, Nakamura or Jason Yao. We see more of a hodgepodge, which is pretty fun. Anyways, I just love the weight of the animation and the way Aizawa's limp arm is animated as a secondary action. It's super satisfying to watch. Unfortunately, this cut in particular I wasn't able to find the animator for, which is fairly common for these early seasons, but luckily the documentation of animators and their cuts do get better as the seasons progress. Thanks to this commenter for suggesting the website I'm using as a source for them. I'll link to it in the description if animation behind the scenes and such is your cup of tea.
That annoying quirk of yours isn't suited for drawing out fights against big groups, is it? You're much better at working stealthily. You're known for surprise attacks, not fighting head-to-head.
Now where have I heard this before?
Your fighting style's not suited for this. Your power works best in stealth and one-on-one fights. That's not gonna help with a group.
Almost the same thing being said by two different characters, huh? This moment, I believe, is why they are emphasizing Shigaraki's intelligence right now. It's to draw a parallel between him and Izuku. It being this early in the series, we don't have much to link the two right now, but showcasing his analysis here, at least subconsciously, allows us to connect the two of them before the more explicit parallels down the line. It's a very smart way to do this without giving away the larger picture between the two.
Look at you, you're still standing. You really are so cool.
This is a really early setup for more of Shigaraki's character, specifically his backstory regarding his want to be a hero. He still can't help but admire them in some way despite his hatred towards hero society, because he also wanted to be a hero once. Also, once again, kind of a parallel to Zuku's admiration of heroes as well.
How unfortunate. You've turned yourself into dust.
Another payoff for 13's speech about the dangers of powers. She specifically pointed out her quirk as being the one that could be used to kill, and here we see that in practice. Also, this plays out a lot quicker in the manga, and honestly, I kind of preferred the pacing there as part of the tone shift, but it's not bad in the anime by any means. How exactly is it physically possible to grab a portal? Wouldn't he just go through it?
But what if it's locked? Will I be able to pry it open in time?
This bit of Iida running is also an extension of the manga. Again, not bad, but I think pacing-wise the manga works a little bit better, though I do like that it shows a bit of the panic that they are feeling.
See? Good as new.
This line is actually in reference to her saying that she can make a new shirt. I don't think I connected that myself for a while.
You want to track everyone down, have fun. But I'm gonna go destroy that warpy bastard.
You know, it may have taken him 8 seasons, but he made good on his promise, I guess. Okay, but genuinely, this is another good example of Bakugo's intelligence and rationality being emphasized by the show. Once again, moving away from that archetype of stupid bully. I also just like Hiroshima here, trying to look out for his classmates, a character trait you may remember being set up by him getting a ton of rescue points in the entrance exams.
I'm always calm and rational, you red-haired loser!
This line kind of piqued my interest because of a fandom thing, actually. If you're familiar, you'd know that shitty hair is sometimes used by especially fanfictions and the like for Bakugo to describe Kirishima, but I always wondered where that came from. Obviously, this is an example of Bakugo commenting directly on his hair, so I checked a few translations to see if this was the origin. It was not, but here are some fun translations. Obviously, we have spiky-haired loser in the English dub. In the sub, it's spiky-haired punk. In the manga, it's damned broomhead. And in this fan translation, which I was really banking on being the origin, he says fucking hair for brain. So unfortunately it doesn't seem to be this line that spawned it. Hell, I don't know if any in particular did. Could have just been spawned purely via the fandom. Anyways, if you want to laugh, find this translation, Bakugo swears in like every other panel for some reason.
I have to help the others.
These couple of scenes are also anime original, like the other Fire and Squirrel Zone scenes. Cool additions. Unfortunately, we do lose out on this pretty cool Ochako panel, though. This team-up between Sero and Sato is also an anime original addition, and it's honestly a really cool way to showcase multiple people's powers and just a bit of teamwork as a whole. The anime really does a good job at drawing more attention to students that were underutilized in the manga in this portion.
He's going to call for backup. It's over.
The English dub cuts the episode title drop here. In the original Japanese and manga, Kurogiri says it's game over. God, these scenes of Eraser getting brutalized are hard to watch, which I think is a great way to get the audience fearful of this Nomu. We saw Aizawa easily take down a bunch of villains, even ones that had quirks that couldn't be erased, so seeing him be this helpless against the Nomu, despite that, really adds some tension to the encounter. So, Shigaraki's scratching. Is it a hint towards his quirk not originally being his? We don't see many examples of people gaining quirks that they didn't originally have, at least not the long-term effects of it, outside of Aoyama, Izuku, and Shigaraki. So it's hard to say absolutely definitively, but I do think it's a small hint regardless. The thing about it that pushes me towards believing it is that when it's revealed, he's specifically scratching his neck again. There's also just not any examples of quirks causing physical irritation like this outside of those three, so it leads me to think that it's deliberately a trait of people being given quirks their bodies weren't designed for. There's a lot of examples of quirks affecting one's mental state, such as Toga, but I don't think that's quite the same thing. Even if unintentional, I think it was good enough of a seed to get people thinking. Hell, it's part of why people started believing Decay wasn't his before it was revealed. So, I think it's neat.
Yeah, but I have a real...
This gag is extremely out of place with the tension that's happening, but I think the immediate cut to Sue drowning Mineta is kind of funny. Maybe one of the only pervert gags that kind of works for me. This is just an excellent sequence, genuinely spine-chilling. I think it's easy to assume that he wouldn't actually kill any of the kids, considering he just sent some lackeys after them. So the sudden turn of, oh, I'm gonna kill some just to make All Might feel bad, is a great tone shift and really sets up Shigaraki as someone who's genuinely a threat to these kids. Someone who wouldn't second-guess killing some. I'd also like to say I wish the anime kept him simply saying, let's leave a few dead kids. That would have been even more chilling. But what we got is great anyways. I love the use of color and just the sound design of Decay here. There's a lot of emphasis on the force of the air Izuku produces from his smashes in these few episodes, which is a cool setup just in general for the future, being able to attack at long range and all that. It really sets him apart to an extent from other strength augmentation heroes in other shows, but even in comparison to like All Might, who still does use the Air Force occasionally, but not nearly as much as Izuku ends up using it.
What? My arm's not broken. I can't believe it!
Fairly easy to put together, but this is because of Nomu's shock absorption. He didn't actually control his smash, the extra force was just absorbed into the Nomu instead of blowing back into his arm. Not to nitpick this badass moment, but considering Nomu is just following commands here, and he has no emotions, shouldn't Izuku be absolutely fucked up here? Sure, Shigaraki could stop right before decaying these two to look at All Might, but I find it a hard sell for Nomu to stop a command just because All Might showed up.
I am here.
It's pretty rare that we see All Might grimacing in this form in general, this certainly being the first instance of it. Sets the tone of the upcoming fight very well.
Looks like our game's getting a continue.
You are such a dork, dude. Also, this is kind of a fourth wall break in the manga, as he says, to be continued, which is funny, especially seeing as this is the last chapter of the volume. But with that, that's the episode. A huge step up all around from the last one. I can still see small bits of pacing issues, but the extensions this episode are much better at carrying the tension rather than diminishing it. Additionally, we just have a lot stronger character moments throughout, and the tone shift does a lot of legwork in setting up for the importance of the upcoming fight next time. Overall, this is just a really solid one. The highlights for me definitely being the Eraserhead stuff. Let's keep the highlights going as we head into the climax of Season 1 with Episode 12, All Might.
But the deeper the darkness around you, the brighter the light shines.
In the recap, there are a couple of new scenes of All Might standing in the smoke, as opposed to last episode where we just saw him walking out of it.
We're saved!
The scene of Mineta is also added into the anime. This moment in general I think is a bit extended just because of the break between episodes. Definitely gets you hyped up though.
I've never seen the guy in person before.
This is no time to talk, you idiots! If we strike now, we can kill him!
Bit of a weird one, but these two background characters actually swapped lines in the anime. In the manga, it's the patchwork guy in Awe of All Might instead. These micro adjustments are always interesting to me. I just wonder who decided to change this small detail.
He's still fast, Father. Somehow he managed to hit me.
This moment is obviously pretty clear foreshadowing for the hands on his body being those of his families, specifically the one on his face being his father's. Though, with how gruesome that concept is, despite it being quite in your face, I feel like it isn't immediately obvious why he's saying father here. Makes rewatching scenes like this much more creepy though.
Of course a government hero relies on violence.
There's a much more in-your-face example of this later in the episode, but it's interesting to see Shigaraki more or less parroting All For One's viewpoints in this fight, rather than his own. He doesn't have a reason to be like this, a villain, other than All For One telling him to. It's kind of like how Izuku doesn't have his ideals quite formed yet either, he just wants to be like All Might, save people with a fearless smile. Shigaraki is the same, wanting to be like All For One. Both of them are aimless outside of vaguely being inspired by those they idolize. It's a fun angle to take for their characters, and it really allows significant growth for them throughout the series as they truly figure out what they aspire for.
All Might really is getting weaker.
This is the first time we see Shigaraki's face, and it's a bit unsettling in the anime, but the manga panel is just so good. I will also say that it's likely All For One who told Shigaraki All Might is getting weaker. I wouldn't put it past All For One to track All Might's fights and such, and the clear decline of how much hero work he can do per day would be obvious to anyone paying attention. There's this kind of funny padding in the episode here where All Might just kind of stands around before attacking. That wasn't present in the manga. I definitely think it would have hit harder if All Might immediately flew into a Carolina smash from his peace sign. Speaking of which, all of All Might's smashes are distinct attacks from one another. It's pretty easy to assume that, but I enjoy that attention to detail.
Job isn't easy.
He's saving us, but at what cost?
I know it's mostly flashbacks, but I really like the direction here and the way it sets the stakes for the fight. Putting Izuku in this unique position of being the only person who knows how dire the situation is, and yet he is near powerless to stop it due to his quirk not being controllable yet. The music building is also just really effective in selling his growing panic.
Oh, come on. What kind of cheap move was that?
So, if Kurogiri put a portal here to pull this maneuver off, what exactly caused the massive cloud of dust earlier? And don't say that Kurogiri warped here after, because not only would that not make practical sense, in that it would probably be difficult to get all of Nomu's bits that are embedded in the ground warp, but also later on there's no crater to be seen. So, what is this dust cloud? Just the force of All Might's movements? The force of Nomu's grab on All Might? I just don't buy it.
Sorry, that won't work. Nomu's as strong as you are. That won't stop him.
I mean, I think it could work if given the chance to try. This was more so just foiled by Kurogiri. It's not like All Might can't be embedded in concrete. Obviously, just by the positioning of Nomu's grab, I think it's a natural place for your hand to land in this situation, but it could also be possible All For One somehow manipulated the Nomu into knowing where his weak spot is. But since it's brainless, I think I'd argue against it, honestly.
The gate shut.
This kind of horrifying visual is anime original. Quite a cool one at that.
Are you crazy?
This scene might be a parallel to Izuku's running without thinking scene in the first episode, specifically this cut. It's not an exact match, but I lean towards it being intentional since the two manga panels also share a lot of similarities, and I think it would make sense for it to be paralleled here as another one of Izuku's moving to save someone moments, though this time not quite going the same way.
Get the hell out of my way, Deku!
I normally wait until it's brought up again to mention a parallel, but since it's one of the final episodes of the series, I'll bring it up here. Bakugo stepping in to save Izuku in the final battle from being warped away by Kurogiri is likely at least partially a callback to this moment in Season 1. It's a parallel I honestly haven't seen brought up anywhere, so I thought it would be worth mentioning. I'll bring this up again when we get there and go a bit more in depth, but I think it was at least worth bringing attention to here.
You okay?
The symbol of peace will not be defeated by delinquents like you.
Guess I found your body that time, you smoky bastard!
These singular lines by the four of them are an extension of these four panels. Very cool to add some additional action for Kirishima just to make it seem like he has a little more initiative in the fight. I think it also just creates a better sense of flow for the fight since we're about to have a bit of a lull in it.
Hey! Can you come help us out? He's super heavy and bleeding all over the place!
I like this line for some reason. Anyways, these few scenes with those who aren't up against Shigaraki are also an anime-only edition, one that's not quite as good as the others. I think this is kind of a pace breaker, but it coming after the commercial break, I can see why they'd want to ease into the fight a bit more. I think just adding a bit more hustle to the scene would have made it stick out a bit less. Everyone just seems a bit too relaxed, even if the Nomu is currently incapacitated.
Kurogiri, how could you let this brat get the best of you?
The dub shifts the blame of this over to Kurogiri rather than the manga's blame going to Bakugo. The sub is an interesting middle ground where he's more just stating a fact. This line in particular, especially in the sub, is interestingly really reminiscent of how All For One speaks in fights, very matter-of-factly. More pointing towards that point I made earlier. But you can almost hear some excitement in his voice over being in a tight spot. It's kind of a cool way to show Shigaraki's eagerness here, especially with him knowing Nomu can get out of this.
Nomu.
Fairly small change, but in the manga, Nomu only breaks out after being told to kill Bakugo, rather than Shigaraki doing it after he's regenerated. I really like this change. I think it builds the tension much more effectively and allows for showboating without wondering why All Might isn't going to protect Bakugo already. I also just love the way they portray Nomu's speed here, with only him and All Might being in color, the two that can actually keep up with one another.
Whoa, that's awesome! You dodged him! Shut up. No, I didn't, you damn nerd.
A bit of characterization for Bakugo here that actually sets up a bit for the future. He doesn't blindly take credit for this, even insulting the idea of it. This shows that Bakugo's not one to take credit unless it's his doing. If they wanted to show off his continued arrogance, it would have been an easy opportunity for him to say, "Yeah, what of it?" or something along those lines. But his pride for his own accomplishments exceeds that. This is followed up upon next season when he wins against Todoroki, but doesn't want the credit when he doesn't consider his victory up to his own standard. He not only wants to be above others, he wants to earn that position without any room for doubt. If he can't dodge that Nomu, he isn't gonna say he could.
But admit it, you're only doing this because you like it. Isn't that right?
He's got me figured out.
It's actually kind of interesting what this line tells us. It's kind of a bait and switch. His speech isn't actually what he believes. This is what I was talking about earlier with Shigaraki not having his own ideals. What he's saying here is likely what he heard from All For One. The ideas that he tried to drill into Shigaraki. But without his own call to action, that's all they are. All For One's ideals, or at least the motivation All For One wants Shigaraki to have, not his own. I think it's a very cool twist to immediately rug pull this speech and show that he doesn't have the conviction to be doing this all by himself. Additionally, this can also serve as a parallel to Izuku's lines in episode 2 when he talks about what hero he wants to be. Both examples here are just hollow parroting. Sure, they could believe the things that they are saying, but it's just because Izuku wants to be like All Might, and Shigaraki wants to be like All For One. They both still need to find their own drives. I love the small moment of All Might giving a thumbs up to Izuku, and it's actually an anime original scene. This, just showing a small bit of confidence to Izuku that it will be okay, even in the face of defeat, is such a small but telling moment for his character. Made even stronger by the fact that All Might knew he'd be facing death around this point in his life because of Night Eye's prediction. Of course, he'd never enter a fight that he didn't think he could win, but All Might could very well be thinking that this could be it for him. So rather than put other students and his successor in danger, he takes the burden of this fight himself so they can get away. Such a potent moment from such a simple gesture.
The world's symbol of peace and justice!
Definitely a shame for the dub to change it to say symbol of peace and justice. Definitely a byproduct of the early dub not knowing the full significance of the title of symbol of peace. Still a very powerful moment regardless. I try not to simply point out me liking something in the show, as it can be a little redundant. So instead, I'm going to try and pay appreciation to the excellent animation throughout this fight, as aside from some small details in the choreography, there isn't too much for me to analyze. Starting out, I just absolutely love the weight of the wind in the shot of Izuku animated by Takumi Tsunekahara. You can really feel the force of it on him here.
That means there's a limit to what you can take, right?
Fairly easy detail to see, but before Nomu starts being blown back, you can see the punch's force begin to exit out of the back of the Nomu, showing its absorption starting to fail before it fully begins to be pushed back. This is also a setup for quirks being physical abilities, not just magic or whatever. This is a concept that's explored a lot more during the sports festival next season. Once again, MHA doing a good job of introducing details like this before they're the complete focus.
Those aren't just random punches either. They're targeted, and every single one of them is more than 100% of his power!
There's a lot of weird things with percentages in this show, and it's kind of best to just hand wave them as being for dramatic effect. But here I believe what Izuku is trying to say is that he's pushing beyond his normal strength he uses in fights. This is a real phenomenon called hysterical strength, which allows us to use more strength than otherwise possible in a crisis. This is because our body normally limits us so we don't tear muscles or strain ourselves to the point of causing permanent damage. I think this is the most likely actual explanation for when people go, quote, over 100% in this show. It would also explain why going beyond his limit causes All Might's time to be more limited. It's physically harming to his quirk.
Find a way for justice to be served!
This entire amazing sequence was done by a team of 3 animators, Tetsuya Miki, Akio Go, and Miso. Just such a gorgeous fight that's one of the outstanding examples of the anime elevating the manga's material. I just love the movement and the weight of all the actions here. Nomu running on all fours, them both crashing through the tree line, the big slam at the end. What really got me about this though, and this is beyond just this episode, is that both Miso and Tatsuya Miki, despite only really working on season 1, both came back for the final season's final fight. That is just so cool.
Go beyond!
And of course, this iconic punch was animated by Hiromi Tanaka, who notably recently got to completely direct and animate the new Vigilantes intro. I truly wish I had more to dissect about this fight, but this is really one of those instances of a My Hero Academia fight not being carried much by emotion, but rather just the contents of the fight itself. This entire arc in general is more setup than anything, serving as an introduction to the League, a way to show All Might in combat, and establishing more of Class 1A. It serves a great role, but due to it just being as early as it is in the series, you aren't going to be able to get some of those emotional highs that later seasons provide with their big fights. That isn't even really a dig against this one though. This is probably one of the most creative fights of the series. It doesn't really stick much to the manga, which I think is a huge benefit to it, and I wish more of the fights in the series took the creative liberties that this one did. In fact, I'd like to give extra credit to the episode director, Tsuyoshi Tobita, for just understanding the assignment here and elevating the manga to such a degree that a good chunk of people still think this is the best fight in the series. And from a pure action standpoint, I have to say it's up there. There's a lot of added fanfare here by the anime of the students reacting to the fight, which I think works well as a way to tie everything together. Again, putting more focus on the class, as well as just being able to end on the note it does. Speaking of which, that's the episode. Sorry if this one was leaning a bit towards me just soy-jacking at the screen and saying, "This is so good!" But this is kind of one of those episodes. Very likely the best of the season. It would be difficult to find someone who disagrees, I think. I will say it's not absolutely perfect. It's lacking a lot of that signature emotional core in the fight that we eventually come to expect. And the episode's pacing does slow down in a lot of places to be able to end where it does. But honestly, those are minor problems when looking at this episode as a whole. It's just a great time, and it's awesome to see All Might fully go out for the first time in the series, as well as the excellent animation that comes along with it. But with that, let's go on to the final episode with Season 1, Episode 13, In Each of Our Hearts.
Damn villain. He totally caught us with our pants down.
To be fair, I don't think I would have anticipated someone burying themselves in the goddamn ground. Why did he do that anyways? I mean, sure, it made it so he didn't get hit by the blast, but I feel like it would have been equally as effective to just, I don't know, wait outside the blast range? Oh well, maybe it was just aura farming.
I feel a little brotherhood with other electric types, so I don't want to kill him, but I will if you make me.
I just wanted to say that this line read always stuck with me for some reason. I just like the coldness of it. Shout out to Greiji Haddock for this performance.
He's probably the one Todoroki said was jamming our communications.
So the early seasons really do heavily imply that electricity quirks are tied to electronics just intrinsically, I guess. I mean, I suppose that makes sense, but it feels a little weird for someone to not only control electricity that flows through technology, but also be able to control electricity just shooting off of your body. Like, logically, how is this guy multitasking, jamming the signals, and holding Kaminari hostage? He can't be in two places at once, right? I don't know. Maybe I'm overthinking it, but this just doesn't seem quite in line with just the basic quirk logic as the series progresses. Though I guess technically it's never confirmed that it's this guy blocking the signal, just heavily implied.
Interesting to know.
Nice try.
It's kind of a small moment, but I'm really glad that this didn't work. I think generally the USJ was going very in favor of the students, almost to the point where it made the villains look like fools. So just this small moment of failure on the hero side really helps you keep in mind that there are real stakes here. Additionally, humbling one of the people who appeared cocky beforehand is a good way to set the stakes for this pretty tense episode. A lot of the remainder of the USJ is essentially a standoff, and easing into that by showing All Might isn't the only one in danger here is a great way to set the tone for the episode as a whole.
Damn it. Don't tell me I was lied to.
Fairly obvious, but again he's likely talking about All for One here. Also shows again that Shigaraki may not be the mastermind, since this line would somewhat imply that he's working under someone.
As I expected. There's no reason for us to fight now. He'll handle this.
This isn't right. He can't beat them. He's bluffing.
I mentioned this last episode pretty extensively, but once again I really like how they deal with tension here by making everyone assume All Might is okay. This is both the benefit and the curse of being the symbol of peace. Everyone becomes complacent. This lack of action from those that could technically help but won't comes from the way All Might has built up this untouchable facade. This specific complacency is what Kaminari brings attention to all the way in Season 8, when he tells Momo he doesn't feel like Izuku is like All Might, an untouchable symbol. Izuku is just a person. All Might wouldn't be in this position if he had shown his vulnerabilities to the public and continued to be perceived as a person like Izuku does. But if he did that, he wouldn't have been able to drive crime rates down by just existing. It's a tough crossroads, but it's certainly a flaw in the idea of having one symbol. This is the first time we see a peek at the negative sides of that in effect. Anyways, I really like how they play with that to build tension here, because logically the hero should be all good, but just because of that assumption, they are leaving it to All Might, who certainly can't win this on his own.
Tomura Shigaraki, please do not fret.
I love the sort of mentor-like or even fatherly relationship Kurogiri has with Shigaraki, obviously coming from him being the protector of him, likely as tasked by All for One. We never see when they meet, but I like the headcanon of him looking after Shigaraki even when he was younger, which does line up timeline-wise, but has no basis in canon, unfortunately, outside of, I guess, Kurogiri's admiration for him. Anyways, I like the way Kurogiri just acts here, kind of encouraging Shigaraki while still having a handle on everything. It does a good job at setting up their relationship, Kurogiri kind of leading Shigaraki towards decisions in a way that he still thinks it's his call at the end of the day. This scene is obviously emphasizing Izuku's speed a lot, which is something the rest of the fight has been doing with All Might. I think the reason this is so focused on is that this is a seed for 3 other characters to use to figure out, or at least begin to piece together the fact that Izuku has ties directly to All Might. For starters, the obvious, Shigaraki. After this fight, he takes note of Izuku as being of particular interest, which makes Shigaraki keep an extra eye on him in the sports festival, and eventually put Izuku on the kill list during the training camp raid. This particular focus on Izuku from Shigaraki was likely encouraged by All for One after Shigaraki tells him later in this episode that he tried to protect All Might, something most wouldn't do unless they knew of All Might's weakness. This likely at least tipped off All for One towards Izuku potentially being the next bearer of One for All. The second person this move likely tipped off was Bakugo. He takes special notice of this move when he looks at Izuku's dust cloud. Then, after the USJ, he has a small moment where he just stares off at the building. While this could just be him reflecting on the fight, I think it has a deeper meaning that he's beginning to put 2 and 2 together on Izuku and All Might's connection. And finally, Todoroki. While best being known for being largely a comedic moment where Shoto asks if he's the secret love child of All Might, he undoubtedly got that suspicion from somewhere, and I'm willing to bet it's here. He's also looking at the dust cloud just like Bakugo, and there really isn't too much else that could have tipped Shoto off to this other than this specific action. This is why I think the reason the show has been drawing specific attention to All Might's speed, only to show Izuku also having a speed moment, is because it's relevant to 3 characters' attention being drawn to Izuku because of this single action. Not to mention, even outside of the speed, it would be strange for someone to step in to save All Might, a perceived unstoppable hero. So Izuku's actions definitely would have been considered noteworthy to them, which could be explained by being the disciple of the hero, or even the secret love child in Shoto's case. But this moment has one more person there, right? So what would Kirishima take away from this? Notice that he's the only one of the 3 not looking at the dust cloud, but rather the action Izuku is taking himself. I believe this moment, Izuku running in to save someone without thinking, reminded Kirishima of a certain other incident that he had read in the news that inspired him to be a hero. As we learn much later down the line in Season 4, and more explicitly in Season 6, Izuku's moment in Episode 2 was an inspiration to Kirishima when applying to UA. So seeing this action may have been why he's so confident much later on that it was Izuku who stepped in to save Bakugo in Episode 2, especially with the added context of Izuku previously being quirkless. Whew! All that is to say, this one action Izuku took to save All Might managed to have a chain reaction for all 4 of the characters watching him. Pretty cool.
Don't you touch All Might, you stupid villain!
This is probably my favorite use of Kurogiri's warp in the series because just, holy hell, it's so cool. It's also just cool that Shigaraki and Kurogiri were able to react fast enough to pull this maneuver off. I wonder if this is something they've practiced. It's just super sick. Aside from the cool move, I wonder if Shigaraki's decay could have killed Izuku here had Snipe not interrupted. Obviously that's the implication with the imagery, but considering the power of decay at this point, it would be difficult to say for certain. I'm willing to bet someone could have stepped in before it was fatal, but his face would for sure be fucked up. Man, Snipe is so cool. I can't wait for him to do even more significant things throughout the series. Also kind of weird how the anime sort of implies Snipe can affect the trajectory of bullets in this shot, which really isn't the case.
But I got the teachers over here as fast as I could.
The anime is once again including more students in these shots, which is good, but we do unfortunately miss out on this panel of Ochako floating Aizawa, instead showing him being carried by Shoji, which is probably more practical, but still.
And I brought reinforcements!
Ah, all the classic UA teachers and faculty. Vlad, Nezu, Cementos, Ectoplasm, Snipe, Hound Dog, Midnight, Power Loader, Present Mike, This is completely unrelated to this episode at all, but for another project I was working on, I was on call with my friends and we got to a scene in the show that has this guy in it. And I mentioned how he was probably no one's favorite My Hero Academia character. I even looked up to see if this guy had fan art and there was none, unsurprisingly. Then I went on to say that this was probably the longest conversation anyone has had about Victor, who is this guy's name by the way. But then I checked AO3 and somehow there are exactly 3 fanfictions naming this specific villain in them. But the real kicker is one of them is focused on him. So shout out to this one fanfiction for proving me wrong. Truly anyone can be someone's favorite character in this show. Not only is it cool to see some of the teachers' quirks and actions, but it's also an anime original scene, which I think is a great addition so that the teachers don't just show up and do nothing before the villains escape.
Let's go home and try this when we can.
I really like how it feels like a genuine attempt to stop them. Like, Snipe shot Shigaraki 4 times, completely immobilized him, then Kurogiri almost got sucked up. They very nearly got them here, and I like that the pros feel like a very competent force against the villains.
Failed to kill you this time, but your days are numbered.
Kind of an ominous moment for All Might here, considering he could very well be the one to kill him, since Night Eye only said a villain and not all for one, even though it was all for one in his vision. I mean, decay would be a nasty way to go.
You bought me a few vital seconds. If not for that, I'd be dead now.
Kind of cool for Izuku to begin the season by saving All Might emotionally, only to save him physically by the end, truly showing his worth as a hero, even if he wasn't able to actually take anyone down either time. Also, the framing of the shot may be a parallel to the "You Two Can Be a Hero" scene, which I think is cool.
He's gonna learn my secret. Not good.
Kirishima, wait!
Very minor change, but it's All Might telling Kirishima to wait here instead of Izuku in the manga. Also, Cementos the goat! This kind of doesn't look like cement though. But who cares?
We should sneak you out of here and get you both to the nurse's office.
This isn't in the manga, so it's not really an issue there, but does this scene imply that the teachers know that Izuku knows about All Might's shrunken form? I mean, obviously Nezu and Recovery Girl would know, but surely not Cementos, right?
And the symbol of peace wasn't weakened at all.
Kind of weird for Shigaraki to go back and forth on thinking All Might is weaker or not, but especially weird after the moment earlier where All Might literally said that he could have beaten Nomu in 5 hits if he was in his prime. Shigaraki also says he hasn't gotten weaker right after All Might says that. For someone whose intelligence was emphasized so much early on, it's strange for him to suddenly lose composure when it comes to this. Or maybe, dare I say, that's intentional? A way to show Shigaraki being childish. a way to show how he's been groomed to hate All Might. That in that anger he loses all composure when it comes to him. The first showings of not the Shigaraki All For One wants him to be, but the Shigaraki he is. Who's to say, really?
And what about the creature the Master and I created? Where is Nomu?
I always tend to forget how early the Doctor is introduced. I mean, for a character that only becomes relevant in 5 seasons, it's cool to introduce him so early. Horikoshi is really good at doing that with characters, most of the time. I do wonder if this was the original intent of the manga, though, or something added retroactively for the anime, because in the manga, there really isn't any distinction between All For One and the Doctor and the stylings of the speech bubbles, and it can kind of be read as both one or two people. Cool nonetheless.
So where did you end up fighting Hagakure?
The landslide zone.
It's kind of funny how Horikoshi in the anime just didn't put any hints towards her being there at all. Definitely lends to the misdirection of her possibly being the UA traitor way down the line. Speaking of which, this was definitely a cry for help of some sort, right? Like, I don't know how this can be framed in any other way after the reveal. Poor Aoyama. Honestly, in hindsight, I'm surprised that Aoyama Traitor wasn't a more popular conclusion that people came to. It was for sure up there in terms of theories, but I honestly saw Kaminari Traitor and even Hagakure Traitor floating around more often back then.
How's Midoriya?
Midori... Recovery Girl is taking care of him, too.
This small moment of recognition here might be the only concrete piece of contention that goes against what I said back when discussing who knows about One For All. Why would he have this small moment otherwise? I mean, maybe it's just him remembering who he is, but it seems strange to emphasize it in this way. Interestingly, this fairly important scene of Bakugo possibly beginning to put the connection of All Might and Izuku together, at least in my interpretation of the events, is an anime original scene. Very cool addition here of what I think is true.
I'd like to investigate every inch of the school just to be safe.
Of course, please do. You'll have full access to the campus.
I forgot to mention this in my original video, but the scene is kind of weird since we never see Tsukauchi around the school investigating or whatever. But what this may be is a byproduct of the original plan for him being that he was going to be working with All For One. Not much detail is known about this, but Horikoshi once mentioned that he originally would be a puppet for All For One, so this scene could have been some setup for that plotline if it went anywhere. Since it didn't, it just kind of sticks out a little weirdly here. I understand why they would change this, but the manga just having a blank panel for Hagakure is so funny. Small callback to the thumbs up he gave Izuku before the fight in the USJ, but now with more confidence. Very nice moment. I really like this small mashup between All Might and Izuku's punches here in the end credits, and some real evidence for my comment earlier about these two scenes being parallels. Wow, I thought I was stretching a little bit, but that's about as concrete as you can get without a literal flashback happening in episode.
But the League of Villains attack on the USJ was just the beginning. A bigger incident was on the horizon.
It's kind of funny to call the complete collapse of Japan an incident, but go off Izuku. Also, it's really sweet that Ochako and Iida waited even until it got dark for Izuku. I really like this anime original bookend for the season. That's not even counting the Stain teaser. Kind of funny to tease an arc that's not the one up next, but I guess it's easier to hype up a new villain rather than a sports festival. Maybe a teaser for Shoto's backstory could have worked, like showing him coming home to Endeavor or something. But regardless, good setup for next time, and a great way to end the season. Speaking of which, that's the season. But before I give my full thoughts on the whole thing, let's talk about the episode itself. This episode I think does a masterful job at creating a real sense of tension and intrigue in a short amount of time. If last episode was the setup for how strong All Might is, this is the setup for the villains being actual threats. Despite them losing, we see them very well nearly win. And on top of that, we have setup for someone above Shigaraki now. In terms of wrapping up the season as a whole, I think it does a good job. I will say the shots of all the students at the end does fall a little flat since we don't know much about them yet. But the talk in the hospital is just really solid, and I think the episode ties up this beginning era of MHA really well. Pretty much everything is at the very least on the table now, ready to be dived into much deeper in the future. As for the season as a whole, I think it's easy to criticize it or even overlook it in conversation due to its overall lower stakes. When people praise the early seasons, they're mainly talking about season 2 or 3, and while I do think those have higher highs, those heights wouldn't exist without the excellent framework season 1 provides to the series. This really sets the stage for just about everything that will be relevant in the next few seasons, and it doesn't feel like it's just dumping that info onto you. The world building is done extremely organically for the most part, and the characters establishment for Izuku, All Might, and Bakugo are all great. I do understand and to an extent agree with the criticism of some of the students not having enough focus, but in 13 episodes I think it would be difficult to make them all stand out whilst also setting up as much as it does. I honestly kind of do prefer the approach of each student eventually getting their own spotlight moment in an arc so that they can shine a bit individually. It would be difficult to have a moment like that crammed all into one season without it feeling a bit forced. I think the season, in not focusing on everyone individually, gains one of its better aspects, which is its pacing. While I complained about it a bit on an individual episode basis, as a whole the season flows really well. It feels like it never has any episodes that are a total drag, it's just very solid. While I don't think the season has anything that I would consider peak MHA, I don't think that makes it bad at all. Even the worst of the episodes in the season have their moments to shine through, and I can't say that about a lot of the seasons. But that is all for this season of My Hero Academia Overanalyzed. Thank you for listening to me ramble about the series for like 3 hours. That is crazy. If you've made it here though and want to see me tackle even more, consider subscribing. Sorry to do that YouTuber thing, but genuinely, if you want to see more, the best way to make sure you see them is to do that. Most of my videos are viewed mostly by returning subscribers. Speaking of which, thank you all for the support thus far. The comments and passion for this series is a huge motivator for this project. We still have many things to cover, so stay tuned for future seasons. I'll see you then.